right, at this time, we're going to go ahead and begin our City Council work session. I will turn it over to our City Manager to begin.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. On the consent agenda, you have 14 items, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. First item is the minutes from the January 2nd meeting, and I'm going to request that this item be tabled until the March 4th regular meeting. I think the clerk is still drafting the special use permit transcripts and minutes there, so I recommend tabling that one. Second item is the January 16th workshop minutes for your review. The third item is the police department badge and gun surplus request from Chief Falls. That's regarding the badge and gun worn by Chief Todd Davis to be declared surplus and presented to him for his years of dedicated service to the Belmont Police Department and the city of Belmont. Item number 4 is the police department's weapons surplus. Given that they had new firearms budgeted for fiscal year 23-24, they have purchased the staccato firearms and they are replacing these older Glock pistols. Therefore, they need to surplus the Glock pistols. The next item is number 5, declaration of surplus of police vehicles, and there are 5 vehicles to be declared surplus, and then we'll go through our disposal process of using gun deals. Item number 6 is the police department's towing contracts. They plan to put this out for new contracts with eligible tow companies, and included inside the consent item is the agreement for the tow record for record services. Councilman Heffron did send in some recommended edits, and so the city attorney and I looked at these edits, and we recommend approval of the edits to be included with this item as well. Item number 7 is the CityRec project closeout. This is following up from the January 16th workshop. The project closeout was presented, and you all asked that city attorney to review and provide an opinion. And you can see that on the next page there is a memo from our city attorney, and it states that his opinion is that the contracts are legal and enforceable as summarized, and that the budget amendment is both substantiated and documented properly, and is consistent with the contract documents governing this project and should be approved by City Council. So that item does include a budget amendment. That budget amendment is at the last couple pages of that particular item. Consent item number 8 is budget amendment number 6 for this fiscal year. It's for the Greystone Lighting reimbursement agreement of $11,686. That agreement has been revised, and the HOA president has signed this agreement, and it's with us now for the mayor to execute at this time. Item number 7 is another budget amendment. This is for the rear loader mini trash truck in the amount of $168,211. Just a little bit of background on this one is that inside the CIP for fiscal year 23-24, a mini trash truck and a claw truck was included in that CIP for debt of $375,000. We are recommending that we don't go out and issue debt for these 2 pieces of equipment. The staff recommends that we go have a budget amendment and use our unassigned fund balance to pay for the mini trash truck. It's only for the mini trash truck at this time. We are getting a revised or updated quote for the claw truck, so I imagine that that will be on an upcoming council consent item. Item number 10 is the budget calendar for 2024. Item number 11 is the parking lease agreement for Chronicle Holdings LLC. This formalizes a prior agreement that prior administration and prior staff members had agreed to, allowing the Chronicle Mill the use of the parking lot that's owned by the city. The Chronicle Mill Holdings improved our parking lot, and so this really just summarizes what was agreed to in the past, putting it in writing, and there are, you can see that the lease is included in here, and there's a few things. The lease term expires December 31st, 2028. It's an automatic renewal for 2 additional periods of 5 years each. They agreed to pay the city $653.41 per month for the rent, and then it increases each consecutive year. It's like a 3% increase. They're responsible for the maintenance and repair, snow removal, anything that occurs there, and then you can see all the other language that's included inside this agreement. Item number 12 is additional, a request to amend the rules of procedure for the Environmental Sustainability Board. This is the bylaws for their board. And you can see that there's a few things that have been added. Natural waterways, pollinators, both have been added. And then section 2.2 really cleans up some of the language where it's not a repeat of everything that they are going to be advising on. Then item number 13 is an approval to close Main Street on April 6th for the House of Mercy Walk for AIDS. I did pass out the Walk for AIDS proposed route. It shows where the route is. And they have the date for April 6th from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. They also wish to hold May 4th as an alternate event date in case of inclement weather. And then the final item, number 14, is approval of an ordinance to close multiple streets for the 20th annual Belmont Classic 5K. There's the ordinance that shows that April 20th from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. this 5K will occur. There are multiple streets that are associated with a map included. Those are your consent items. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you at this time.
All right, with that, are there any questions
Yes.
for the city manager on these items?
I'd like to make a motion to pull item number 11 regarding the parking lease agreement for Chronicle Holdings off the consent agenda, just to allow for a little more discussion, especially for those of us who were not involved in that original agreement.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, when the appropriate time comes, I'll second that as well.
So that would be C10.
So C10 would move to B,
No,
or
B11.
B11 will move
B11.
to C10.
Right.
Okay.
All right, are there any other questions on any of these consent agenda items?
I don't think we need to go into huge detail on it, but just out of curiosity, on item number 9 there, with doing this in cash as opposed to debt services, was this just more advantageous for us to just buy it outright as opposed to get a loan for it?
We could get a loan. Of course, if you go out for debt, then you have to go to the LGC for debt for approval. And so we had submitted our audit. You just have to get on the actual agenda for the LGC. We hadn't done that at this time. We feel like we got a healthy fund balance, and so not to take out further debt when we can just outright pay for these pieces of equipment.
And overall, this should benefit the budget plan we passed last cycle as well, right? Because we had originally had this in the debt services.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make that note because, again, now that gives us something to play with for additional projects as it comes up during the retreat. So, thank you, Miles.
Yes, sir.
Just a few things. With respect to the tow contract, Miles mentioned that I had some edits. Most of those were cosmetic, but there were a couple provisions that I thought should be added substantively. One of those being what's called a merger integration clause, which basically says that that agreement is the entire agreement between the parties and supersedes all prior or contemporaneous agreements, written or oral, between the parties. And that's just a standard provision, especially since, as Chief Falls mentioned, these are new contracts replacing old contracts. It's easier that way. You don't have any other contracts floating around or somebody saying, well, you told me X. I know the contract says Y, but you told me X on the phone. Therefore, that's part of our contract. It's a standard provision. Parks can add it pretty easily. And I'd also include a governing law provision that it's governed by North Carolina law, just to clear that up. I'll also point out that I made some edits to the Environmental Sustainability Board Rules of Procedure, which, if we approve, I mean, they're cosmetic, so approval of the consent agenda, I would be subject to those edits as well. And then with respect to the road closure for the 5K, my only concern was that the route says only the right lane of the roads will be closed, but the ordinance we're asked to pass just says the streets. So are we closing the entire street or just like a lane of these streets?
Looking at Phil Cassidy. Cassidy will come up and answer that.
Mm-hmm.
Just for clarification there, the request was for the complete road with the exception of Keener Boulevard. That is the only road that will involve a single lane closure, but our practice is typically to ask for more than we absolutely need just in case.
Okay.
But I did confirm that with the event applicant and the police department.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, with that, we'll go ahead and move into our regular meeting. I'll go ahead and call that to order. I believe we had a pastor to do our invocation who is not available. So Jim, would you stand in for him?
All right, I was thinking maybe I would have a reprieve today, but apparently, let's bow our heads and pray nevertheless. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings that you've bestowed in our city. We ask for your wisdom and guidance in handling the matters before us today. We ask that you bless all of our police officers, firefighters, and citizens who are here in attendance today. And we ask that you continue to protect and keep our city safe and secure, and our residents protected and able to pursue life and liberty and happiness. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Catherine, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance to
To
the
the
flag
flag
of the
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next, item 4, recognition and acknowledgements. I believe Chief Davis is going to take us through the first segment.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'd like to thank you for the time to come up and recognize a few of our staff for this past year and their achievements. First, I'd like to introduce to you the 2023 Firefighter of the Year. It went to Engineer Francisco Tellez of Ladder 43B. This next 2 awards was are new awards that was assigned by our awards committee. They felt that there was other needs to recognize good work, and that's part of what we do. We recognize good work. We're real quick to recognize the bad, so why not recognize the good, and let's balance this stuff out. So the awards committee have requested that we give out an Officer of the Year, and so our first ever 2023 Officer of the Year goes to Captain Stephen Roberts, Engine 43B. And this next award is the Chiefs Award, which did not go to a firefighter. This Chiefs Award went to our very own Tyler Graham. Tyler, during our transition, has done a lot of work behind the scenes to help us during this transition, and we're very thankful for him. So Tyler was the first ever Chiefs Award recipient as well. Also, I'd like to bring up our 4 graduates this year on the fire department from the Public Safety Leadership Institute. We've also invited Major Patricia Brown here. She's the senior program developer for law enforcement training and public safety at Central Piedmont Community College. And Chief Falls is going to talk more about her here shortly, and she'll be able to explain this program a lot more in depth. But our current graduates this year or last year were Captain Donald Hill from Engine 43A. He's on a call. Captain Blair Gribble, Engine 43C. Captain Stephen Roberts, Engine 43B. And Captain Andrew Harris from Engine 44C. In 2023, we were fortunate enough to have 4 seats starting in the spring semester at CPCC to start entering the fire department through this public safety leadership. Last year, we graduated 8. That's remarkable, and we have 4 enrolled there now, scheduled to graduate by the end of spring. So it's really made a big impact on what we do between the calls, and that's where we needed the help. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, I'd like to thank you for bringing us that good news.
Mm-hmm.
And congratulations to all of you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations, Tyler. I don't know how you.
All right, Charlie.
I'm gonna try some.
All right, Alex.
The tall guys come back.
Catherine, you're hiding.
Catherine.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
guys.
congratulations, guys.
Thank you, Matt. Congratulations.
So I'm trying to remember now. It's been so long since I went through PSLI. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking through CPCC's website. They send us some stuff that has upcoming classes. And we learned about Public Safety Leadership Institute. And then I got to meet Major Brown myself because I myself am a graduate of her program. And I'm not going to steal all of the thunder of what she does. I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about that. But since a couple of people went through the institute before I did, but since then, we have graduated, and to include myself, 20 people from PSLI. And it's at CPCC North Campus. I'm not even going to kill the name of it, Maracas or something, I think, campus. But anyway, when I first went into this class and I met Major Brown, I was like, whoa. And she has an Army background, and I was overwhelmed. I was like, oh, wow. She's all about business, and she is. But I learned throughout that process that she's very good at what she does, and she has a big heart, and she's willing to help anybody. But I will say that she has one of the premier institutes for leadership in the region, and we're so glad to be a part of that. And we're so glad you showed up to speak about what you do. But we've graduated 20 people through this, and along with the fire department graduating 8. And so I myself personally have seen my growth through leadership, through some of the knowledge and skills and things that I've taken off from there, but also I've watched my staff grow tremendously and accept their new responsibilities in leadership and supervision, and I know it's directly related to what she does. So I would like to introduce you to Major Brown, if you'd like to come up and just give a little brief overview, and also thank her not just for coming, but for putting on the institute that she does. It's so successful.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. I think I've already been formally introduced. I would first like to say thank you for this recognition on behalf of Central Piedmont Public Safety Department. We are so proud of our program. We started this program back in 2013, and we just recently graduated our 21st institute, and we're very proud of that. Back in 2013, I came on with Central Piedmont back in 2004. And because of my military background and all my experience as a supervisor and a middle manager, I came to Central Piedmont and I said, you know, I got promoted to sergeant with Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. I was a detention officer. So it was a very easy transition for me to move from line staff to a supervisor because of my experience in the Army. So when I came to Central Piedmont, I said, you know, we need to develop something for our middle managers coming up through the ranks, because mainly you'll find with public safety professionals, you get the higher the rank, the more they send you to training. And you kind of miss that opportunity without having tools in your belt. So I started this back in 2013 to give folks an opportunity to have some tools in their belt. So once they're promoted, at least they'll have something, some conflict management, learning about themselves, and so forth and so on. So it's a 16-week program, over 60 hours or more of leadership training. It's a very diverse cadre that facilitates the training. And again, we're very proud of it. And I am so pleased to be invited. And thank you, Belmont Fire and Belmont Police, for the support of our programs. Our goal, when we're very passionate about offering cutting-edge training, we want to increase our partnerships, we want to grow current partnerships, and continue to do what we do. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
So with that said, I'd like to bring up the three last graduates of the class: Tony Cape, Lieutenant Tony Cape, Corporal Kristen Wilson, and Officer Kevin Wingate. If y'all come up, be recognized. These are from the last class. This is the graduates from the police department. Just stand up here. I think we're gonna get a picture. So my goal, we're at 20 right now, but my overall goal for the police department is to have every one of our officers, and we're already down to like our low-level supervisors, our corporal level now, and we don't plan on doing anything more or less than getting every one of our officers to be a graduate of this leadership program. So if y'all would like to get a picture with them, now would be the time.
Congratulations.
Oh my gosh, fill the gap.
Come on up.
You stand right here.
Oh, you're in front. Congratulations.
Yes,
Sir, thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thanks for your service.
Time to congratulate.
Congratulations. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Today, we are excited to celebrate some dedicated service awards to several of our employees who have reached milestones 5 years, 10 years, 20 and 25 years in various departments. They've gathered with us today. There are a few that are unable to be here with us due to scheduling conflicts, so I'll keep them for the last piece of the recognition. And we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So first, for the 5 years of service, we'll go ahead and go through those. Aaron Black, Police Captain. If you'll come up, please. All right, Police Officer Kristen Wilson. Okay, Firefighter 2 and EMT Engineer Francisco Tellez. Our Downtown Director, Phil Bogan. Right, our Community Development Coordinator and our Deputy City Clerk, Cassidy Lackey. Thank you. And those unavailable to be here with us today are our Utility Maintenance Mechanic, Chad Powers, our Water Treatment Plant Operator 3, Trey Winchester, our Water Treatment Plant Operator 1, Antonio Martin, our Wastewater Treatment Plant Operator 3, Adam Bridges, and our Water Treatment Plant Operator 1, Keith McCain. So thank you all. We'll go ahead and get a picture.
I think we're gonna take pictures.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Congratulations.
All right. Next, we have our 10 Years of Service Awards. We'll start with our School Resource Officer, Pip Connor. Oh, I'm going to butcher this. I do apologize. Our Park and Kalia Manager. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. Tyler Graham, come on up. Our Police Administrative Assistant, Victoria Rumfeld. She might not be here. It's okay. Police Officer Creston Siegler. Thank you. Fire Shift Supervisor and Training Officer Stephen Roberts. Firefighter 2 and EMT Engineer Billy Correll. Fire Shift Supervisor and Training Officer Blair Gribble. And we have one that was unable to attend today, our Lead Development Inspector, Kyle Mitchum. So thank you all.
Congratulations.
Okay, and for our 20-year service awards, we only have two. Our Police Sergeant, Matt Strew. And Meter Service Technician, Mike Bain. All right. Thank you both.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you for your service. Congratulations.
And for our 25-year service award, we have one special employee who has been with us for 25 years. I've asked his department head to come up and say some few kind words about him. Alex Robinson. Alex.
Yes. So, Alec, thank you so much for your 25 years of service. I do have a few words. Thank you all for the time of allowing me to share. So, just want to share that Alec Robinson has begun his career with the city of Belmont in December 17th, 1998. And he first started as a code enforcement official. He was then promoted to planner in May of 2007 and later promoted to his current role of senior planner in July of 2013. Alec is a devoted employee and a valued asset to the planning team. He's often behind the scenes, taking on critical tasks for departmental operations without any expectation of his or acknowledgement for all that he does to help keep things moving along. Alec is recognized by his colleagues for his extensive professional knowledge, as well as his willingness to assist others whenever needed. No matter how obscure the topic, he usually has an answer or knows exactly who to call. He is kind and eternally patient when coworkers need information or guidance, and is eager to mentor other staff. His dry humor, musical taste, and sense of fun make the workday more enjoyable for us all. He doesn't always say much, but when he does, you can always count on Alec to be honest, accurate, and insightful. Please join our entire planning team in congratulating Alec for his 25 years of service to date to the city of Belmont, and thank him for all he does for our community.
Get out of that. No pictures, please.
Thank you for your time.
All right, before moving on, I just exercise a point of privilege and thank everyone for their years of service to the city. By years of service to the city, of course, I mean to the citizens of Belmont. So thank you very much for that. I did note that Tyler Graham and Stephen Roberts almost pulled off the hat trick tonight. They had 2 awards, one shy of a hat trick, but congratulations to you all. With that, I would entertain a motion with a suggested modification on the consent agenda.
I think we need to set the overall agenda
Oh, I'm
first,
sorry.
and I'll make
Motion to
that
set the
motion.
agenda.
Second.
All right, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Now,
I will make the motion to approve the consent agenda with the modification of moving B11 of the consent agenda to C10 of the regular agenda.
also,
And with the edits.
And with the edits that Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Jim Heffernan added to the towing contract
and postponing.
and city, or excuse me, the item 14, right?
it was a B2, B6, and B12.
B2, B6, and B12.
Plus tabling B1 until the regular meeting.
Plus
minutes.
tabling B1 until the regular meeting. Thank you.
Until March. Second.
All right, we have a motion and second to approve as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, let's move into our regular agenda, public comment. Thank you. All right, for public comment, we have 3 signed up. First petitioner is Brian Burns.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Once again, it is time for Brian Burns, 240 Hawthorne Park Avenue. I'm the chairman of the Belmont ABC Board. It is once again time for ABC store distributions. I've brought a check today for the second quarter distribution of $55,411.10 to be distributed to Miles.
Well, to be distributed
to the city.
Yeah.
Miles, you should be
Miles,
so
what are you doing with that money? Appreciate it. Just to give you an update of things going on in the store, things are going well. We are right on budget. That's what we had predicted. We plan on meeting as a group in a couple weeks to basically have a planning session to talk about items going forward, whether it's expansion, not to do it, whatever, and hopefully have at least a consensus opinion on what it is we're going to do going forward, and what the right move is for not only for us but for the city. So other than that, things are going well, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Are there any questions?
So the decision to add another location has not been.
It has not been determined.
Okay.
We hired a consultant, and the consultant came back with their report, and we felt we really needed to take the time to go over it and hash it out as a group and make the right decision instead of just trying to, do it in a normal meeting.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we're doing a planning session in a couple weeks, and I think we'll have an opinion one way or the other.
Okay.
I believe. So.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
All right. Well, Brian, I want to thank you for the work that you do, and I wish that you would extend our collective thanks to your board as well.
Well, thank
Yes,
you. I
well,
have Tim Sommers, a board member, with us tonight, and Bill Montgomery, our manager. They both do a really great job, and we have a really good team. So I think we work really well as a board, and we all are very thoughtful of what it is we do and our responsibilities for the city. So
Again, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
thank you, guys. All right.
All right, with that, our second speaker is Jennifer Church. And for the record, please state the name and address, please.
Good evening, Mayor Turner and council members. My name is Jennifer Church, and my address is 502 Park Street in Belmont. I currently serve as the Main Street Program Chair and the Downtown Belmont Development Association Chair. As we enter a new year, the Main Street DBDA would like to thank the City Council for partnering with us to create a vision for Belmont, a vision that's been recognized on a state level by the North Carolina Main Street program. We have partnered with you, the City of Belmont, on Friday Night Live concert series, Moonlight on Main in 2021, our Christmas Village, East End facade improvements on Catawba Street in 2023, the City of Belmont tree lighting, and the Festival of Trees. And now the DBDA has another vision for our community, creating arts programming, arts classes for our community at the J. Paul Ford Center to serve kids and adults in Belmont with arts programs taught by local artists and teachers. We plan to partner with many seniors in our community as art instructors. There are many in the Gaston County community who wish to share their creativity and their love for art with others. A child's gift of creativity must be nurtured, and our seniors thrive when part of an intergenerational community. I'm excited for the possibilities when kids, adults, and our seniors can come together to expand their creative side. Painting, drawing, knitting, pottery, sculpting, photography, and music, all are possibilities in the J. Paul Ford Center. This arts program will further expand the city's offerings, yet not duplicate Parks and Recs programming, which is athletic focused. The economic impact of art in our community has been shown with Moonlight on Main. Over 20,000 visitors and the economic impact of $1.7 million for that event. Our 4 Main Street committees, design, promotion, economic vitality, and organization committees, have started researching grant funding and finding other local and regional cities who can help us to create successful arts programming in Belmont. We will look to existing arts groups, Art by Jay, Bliss Gallery, Gaston County Arts Guild, and Gaston County Arts Council to partner with us. And we hope that the City of Belmont will continue to partner with us and consider use of the J. Paul Ford Center for arts programming in our community. Thank you for your consideration of our request.
Thank you. Our third speaker, I believe, trying to read this, is, I'm going to say Martha Hubble. Okay. And again, if you would, just identify yourself and give us your address.
I'm Martha Hubble. I live on 23 Oak Street. Hey, everybody. Thank you for this time. I am here this evening to talk about the Art Center also with Jennifer and the DBDA. I volunteer with the DBDA on 3 different committees, and I'm enjoying very much building community with them. I've lived in the Charlotte region for about 40 years. And a year and a half ago, I decided to move to Belmont, but downtown Belmont specifically. I live within walking distance to all the fun stuff, and that's very important to me. I chose to move here because it was nostalgic and very much a blossoming community. I am passionate about developing a dedicated arts and cultural center in downtown Belmont, because it will magnify the heart of downtown Belmont. One of my favorite things to do is to visit and revisit several of our neighboring nostalgic towns, like a lot of us do. But I only visit those towns that have downtown art centers, because those communities have an atmosphere of thriving and liveliness. And there's a known difference when I'm there. It's not the same in the others. The art centers are magic. In Tryon, Spartanburg, Elkin, Brevard, you can sense and feel the residents' connection to the pottery classes, rotating art and sculptural exhibits, multi-generational art classes, photography classes, fabric art such as weaving and batik demonstrations, and everything else that Jennifer mentioned. Another important thing that we will want to do, and that I notice when I'm there, is the consistent active program lists. And that is where the liveliness comes from and the sense of thriving. That is where the people are in the arts of the community. And I want this for our Belmont community. Members of our design committee have each chosen one art center from about 10 that we have selected over our region. And as Jennifer said, we're gathering data to assist us in developing our successful program here in downtown Belmont at the Ford Center. With our many resources and connections, our Art Center in Belmont will showcase our thriving and lively art community of all ages with beauty and purposefulness for their lives, especially the seniors, really appreciate that purposefulness. And I myself would actually love to teach the seniors. In our DBDA Design Committee, we have brainstormed about pottery classes, and we actually have a kiln promised, I believe, to us. Photography classes, storytelling, wooden toy making, knitting classes, water, oil, acrylic classes, and the youth will have summer art camps and weekend workshops. And the seniors will be offered whatever they want. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, that is all the public comment we have for this evening. That will take us to item number 2, public hearing for Complete Kids at Belmont Middle School.
Parks, let me ask.
Moved. You have to move to go.
Do we open it first? Or,
All right.
I would move to go into public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're in public hearing.
Now you move that the hearing be continued until the March regular county March 4th meeting.
I move that the public hearing on this item be continued until the March 4th regular city council meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Come out. Okay. Right.
Yes, right, because we're.
That's right.
Okay, continuing. All right, that will take us to item number 3 for Alliance Bank. Entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are in public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is zoning map amendment ZA 2022.01A regarding 500 Park Street. Here we go. Gaston County parcel ID number 305465. In February of 22, a previous council approved a conditional district rezoning for this site. It was the site of 2 residential single-family homes. Thank you. And located at the corner of McLean Avenue and Park Street, just up the street from Walgreens. So the request is to modify the original map amendment to allow a bank building of less than 4,000 square feet with certain revised site conditions. Briefly, there's a location map showing Walgreens on the corner at the top to the north. The site is immediately behind that. There's residential property across the street and professional offices to the south, and rental property, residential property across Park Street. This is the site as it would look today from a drone. The houses have been demolished. There was a brick retaining wall on the corner that has been taken down. It was a sight triangle impediment to motorist vision. Previously approved plan is shown here. Roughly 10,000 square foot office building shown in the white block, fronting on Park Street with parking in the rear. The amended plan, and that was a multi-tenant office building without any known tenants. It was just going to be what they call a vanilla shell that would be modified to suit the tenant that would rent it. The amended plan shows a single use tenant, a regional bank, reduction in square feet from 10,000 to 4,000 square feet with associated drive-through lanes and typical bank layout. The areas of relief that they requested are the reduction in square feet, adding of teller lanes, the addition of a driveway on Park Street, which would be right in, right out only, increased buffers between the building and the sidewalk, and increased residential buffers. The applicant held a required community meeting at the Y, and no members of the public attended. Last month, the planning board voted unanimously to send this to y'all with a positive recommendation. So briefly, the summary is a request to approve this amended zoning district with the areas of relief for a bank. And as you saw in your packet, our traffic consultant, Kimley Horn, determined that no mitigation measure would be needed. So we ask you to receive this report, conduct a public hearing, and render a decision to approve as presented, approve as modified, or disapprove. And the planning board did find that this was consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Just a minor thing. One of the items that says that the applicant is requesting is to add the driveway to Park Street right in, right out only, but that's already there, right? I mean, it's
there's a driveway cut there for the.
I mean, there's a road there, right? That's
for the residential house that was there, but this is a commercial driveway rather than a residential.
Okay.
So it may require state approval.
Yeah.
It's a DOT road. I believe it will require an encroachment agreement.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I had one related to the slide you had with areas of relief.
Yes.
I get that those are what's being done, what's being changed as a result of the revision to the building, but are they really areas of relief? Because I don't see them as part of the conditions. Wouldn't they normally be included as part of the conditions if they were truly an area of relief?
Well, I guess if you consider that they're increasing buffers, modifying parking, I see your point, yes, sir. We're noting that it's being done, so it's reducing the amount of relief needed. Is that accurate to say?
I just want to make, they're reflected somewhere, right? That these, I mean, when something's called an area of relief, I figure that needs to be, if we're giving them relief in that area, that it would be reflected somewhere, like as a condition or what have you.
Well, I would just, we can make sure that it's correctly worded in the modification section.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, Jim. At least have it listed out. I mean, I remember when the original one came to us, and this is, again, in my opinion, more agreeable, right? Because of the increased buffering, the less density, if you read through like Kimberly Horn's analysis as well, because that was the biggest concern of that particular intersection there is all the traffic that would be increased to this, but this shows that it will actually decrease potentially from what the original proposal was. And secondly, this council has designated, well, prior to Charlie and Catherine and Jason, this area similar to this type of businesses over there. So I think it's a win.
Last one had areas of relief and conditions of approval. Do the same.
It was parking in the buffer itself, wasn't it? The previous one?
Yeah, well, there. If you look on page
15.
attachment F, which is if you've got the printout, I think it's 234. Like those are areas of relief and conditions of approval, and there's some change. There's a red line of what they don't need anymore and what they're changing, but I don't see a number of those other things. So that's what had me curious.
Says this has now been removed Wouldn't that mean as in they're now in compliance?
Right, yeah. Like, I think one of them was remove the retaining wall. Well, that's removed. So if we're modifying it, we don't need to make that a condition anymore.
Right.
But some of these other things, I don't know, maybe I would have expected to see them, in the conditions of approval. If they're in fact areas of relief from what's typically.
The last one had a combination exhibit A, areas of relief and conditions of approval. Would you like to see that at the same kind of format?
Sure.
We can make that notation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, then with that, I would entertain a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are now out of public hearing, which will take us to item number 4. Consider an ordinance of approval of the Alliance Bank request.
I would move to approve subject to all areas of relief and conditions discussed in the presentation being included and attached as Exhibit A to the ordinance.
Second.
All right, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
I would also move to find that this is a reasonable request and consistent with the goals of the adopted comprehensive land use plan in terms of land use, economy, and community character.
All right, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, this brings us to item number 5, public hearing for text amendment 2023.04, an amendment for minor subdivision requirements.
Move to go into public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are in public hearing.
Good evening, Council. This is, for summary, text amendment 2023.04 related to minor subdivisions. The applicant for this text amendment is Bailey Park Developers, and the representative is here tonight. This is Nick Besley, if you have any questions for the applicant. This text amendment is primarily focused around 2 areas for your consideration, and they are both specifically and only related to the application as it relates to minor subdivisions, which are defined in our ordinance as 7 or fewer residential lots. And there are specifically not only minor subdivisions, but this is specific to minor residential subdivisions. So it's 7 or fewer residential lots is the consideration for this text amendment. And the areas for this text amendment specifically focus on the street frontage improvements, which is caveated as allowing for consideration of different standards where there's no public streets proposed. So the subdivision is located fully along existing streets, and or where there's no similar infrastructure presented along either adjacent property. So if either neighbor has it, it would still be just as it is today in our ordinance. And then the other area that they are asking for your consideration for a text amendment is in the area of tree protection, specifically to allow for some flexibility and relief in the requirements for a full tree inventory, as well as tree conservation easements for minor residential subdivisions where there is no common shared open space involved. I will not go over all the items as noted in your staff report, but I did want to highlight the proposed amendments as they are presented to you for your consideration by Planning Board, and those include a few different areas. One is that in Chapter 11.3, we currently have a list of all types of projects that may be already exempted from the full application of the section. And so the proposed text amendment would add minor residential subdivisions to that list. Alongside it, similarly situated, would be exempt subdivisions that already are defined by the state, as well as residential infill projects. So this is a really similarly situated use, and we are recommending and proposing its inclusion, separately defined though as a bullet here. The other area where we are asking for your consideration of a text amendment is in Chapter 11.4. So this is, while the previous 11.3 focused on tree protection, 11.4 focuses primarily on new landscaping plantings. And so the thought here would be, while we may be introducing some additional relief for the protection of the existing tree canopy, to buffer that by increasing the requirements for new plantings, specifically on residential minor subdivision lots. And so you see here in red is this original staff proposal, and the green, as included on the screen and in your packets exhibit, are the modifications as recommended by Planning Board. On this particular item, Planning Board's recommendation was to actually merge bullet number 2 and number 3. So it's presented as a separate bullet just for clarity purposes for you. But that's not really new text. It's just a merging of bullet 2 and 3 into one item. And then in chapter 8, which is related to our streets, the proposed text amendment introduces an applicability section in order to make sure to clarify when chapter 8.2 specifically may be eligible for application by staff. Right now, the ordinance reads, all new development shall improve the frontage at every area as outlined in chapter 8. So this would allow for some additional flexibility based off of the density and or size of that lot, specifically to allow for some flexibility for minor residential subdivisions in here. You can see the green text that has been recommended by Planning Board for your consideration, in addition to that of staff, is to add a sentence in there that would say where curb and gutter is not required to be installed per the recommendation of this text amendment, that the Public Works Director or designee shall have discretion to require a payment in lieu, specifically along city streets, if the city already has an adopted plan to install curb and gutter along the project frontage. So the thought here would be that sometimes it doesn't make sense to have curb and gutter just on a very short isolated segment, almost like an island to itself for functionality purposes. But if the city already has a longer range investment, that the developer would at least have the opportunity to offer a payment in lieu of that could go towards a larger project for the city. So Planning Board is recommending your consideration of that change as well. Ultimately, the proposed text amendment that is coming before you tonight has been reviewed by the Environmental Sustainability Board. Their role in this is specifically to review Chapter 11 as it relates to our tree protection ordinances, and the proposed text was unanimously recommended for approval by City Council as originally proposed by staff. When this item went to Planning Board with all the chapters for being considered, Planning Board made a unanimous recommendation to approve, but with modifications as was presented earlier in my presentation. And ultimately, Planning Board made two findings: one, that the text amendment was a reasonable request and in the public's interest, and also that the text amendment as modified was consistent with the goals of the comp plan in the areas of land use, infrastructure, and the environment. And so with that, we are asking for City Council to receive staff's report, Planning Board's recommendation, any public comment, and ultimately render a decision on this proposed text amendment. And then just for your reference, as you make the motion, you can make a motion to approve as presented, as modified, or disapprove, and then we are asking you to make the two required findings as well. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So first of all, could you sort of maybe give us an example of the type of parcels that this might pertain to? I'm assuming it's typically like infill, where there's no ready access, there's no public streets apparently connecting. Sure. And then two, maybe just to provide sort of a high-level summary of what it is that the requester is seeking to accomplish here with regard to street frontage improvements and tree protection requirements.
Sure, and the applicant is here, so I can do my best, but I would say to understand full intent, I would probably defer to the applicant to speak on what prompted them to go through the text amendment application process. One at a time, and I want to make sure I'm answering them in order.
Of a parcel that
sure. So residential infill is already included as an exempt subdivision in Chapter 11.3. But one of the questions that has come up is residential infill is defined in Chapter 11 as a project that is surrounded by built-up residential area. Well, we don't define what makes it built up. Is it when it's surrounded by 3 out of the 4 parcels, 5 out of 6? What really meets the definition of built up? And if an area is built up, but it's not built up fully by residential, is it still considered to be an infill project? And so the ordinance is not as clear in that area. So one of the things that has come up in dialogue is, if the intent was to treat it truly like a residential infill for minor subdivisions, maybe it makes sense to have the ordinance reflect that, right? And so one example of this, and the applicant shared it with planning board, and so I'm hoping that they're comfortable with me sharing it with you, is there is an active development application on file along Parkdale. And so Parkdale is along a state road. There's no curb and gutter on either side. The state, in our experience, is not necessarily a fan of curb and gutter within a short segment of that frontage. And in addition to this, neither parcel on either adjacent side has any infrastructure. And so if we put sidewalk there, if we put curb and gutter there, it would be an isolated pocket that would then have implications on future city maintenance to go and address those things until future connectivity provides some additional benefit to the city to be able to do that. And
It
so
would literally be the proverbial sidewalk to nowhere.
and we have them. We have them, and so this is to say, on larger projects, maybe, in all certainty, it likely makes sense. On a major subdivision where there are a lot of lots, makes sense, absolutely, to improve street frontage. A lot of times, major subdivisions are introducing new streets. They're not along existing corridors, right? So while they're installing new streets, having them do all of that makes sense. But there may be some applications where some additional flexibility is warranted for the city's consideration. And so that is the goal of this text amendment. And it's also the goal to keep it very narrow in focus. And so it is not intended to provide a solution that just offers a free pass. It's really intended to be focused to make sure that we are balancing the needs of the city and the needs of the developer to get projects that are beneficial to the greater public.
I don't believe you answered the second question.
She was I think she's going to let the requester,
okay.
Mr. Vesely, address it.
All right. Just for clarification for the record, one of the reasons why you all focused on the tree preservation side is that unless residential subdivisions were exempted, they would be required to have a tree conservation easement to preserve a certain amount of existing trees. But because minor subdivisions aren't required to have open space, that would very likely lead to these tree conservation easements being located on private property. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our current ordinance requires 20% minimum tree save area to be encumbered in a tree conservation easement for all residential projects. And so without that common open space to put that tree conservation easement along, it would have implications on private property owners' ability to do any additions or locate any outbuildings on those parcels.
And the 11.4 that you looked at that dealt with other ways to meet the tree preservation requirements was, again, for the record, that was added at the behest of the Environmental Sustainability Board, correct, in order to incentivize preserving existing tree canopy.
That is correct. It was a suggestion of the Environmental Sustainability Board that was supported by the applicant, and we worked together to refine multiple options that would simultaneously allow for the encouragement of protecting existing tree canopy where possible and feasible. So for projects that did not need to clear the entire site, there is a benefit of up to 5% of tree save area that you could get to just, incentivize them to save the trees as opposed to clear cutting the entire lot. But if they're not able to do that based off the size, scale, and topography of the property, they are encouraged to then plant at minimum new trees that equate to 20% of the tree canopy. And in addition to doing that, plant them at a caliper that's larger than what would typically be required within our ordinances so that they're more established and can become more established quicker on the site.
Are there any other questions for Tiffany?
Perfect.
All right, this time, would it be appropriate to bring Mr. Vesely up to answer the second question?
Absolutely. What was your drive to submit the text amendment and your purpose and what your goals are for it?
Sure. So Nick Vesely, 106 Stowe Road, for the record. So as Tiffany mentioned, we did submit Parkdale Manor, which is 7 lots on Parkdale Drive. There was initial debate between Tiffany and myself back in July or so, what a built-up area is. So we have this existing Duke Energy substation to our west. We have the Belmont Housing Authority to our east. To our south, across the street, we have an existing housing development on Sandra Court, and then we have the elementary school on the other side. So it looks relatively vacant, and it's built up with other uses, but obviously we're not sure what the clear definition is of built upon area. So as far as Chapter 11 is concerned with the tree ordinance, that was just a clarification. So we had already felt like it was a property rights issue. So I was on the committee that wrote the tree ordinance, and we had specifically exempted infill developments and single-family residential for single individual lot owners. And the reason for that is that we didn't think it was fair at the time to apply tree easement or tree save easement to an individual property owner. It's one thing when you have a large development like a Henry's Chapel or a Smith Farm, where you have multiple residents that could contribute to the open space and protect the trees. In the instance of smaller infill type minor subdivision, where you'd be putting easements on people's lots, now that individual homeowner becomes responsible for the protection of the trees in the long term. So if a tree dies in that easement, which, in a small lot, that might be one tree. If that tree dies, that homeowner becomes responsible to replace that tree, especially at a higher rate, because you assume that it'd be a larger tree at that point. So that was just a straight clarification. We worked with the Environmental Sustainability Board to apply the 3 criteria that you would then say would be like an even substitution. So the ordinance already requires you plant 2 trees on every single family lot, 1 tree in the front yard, 1 tree in the backyard. We felt like that was a reasonable request if we take those 2 trees and increase them in size. I would request that you consider removing the planning board recommendation to combine. We felt like that was kind of double dipping on the requirements. So we're either providing it as existing, we're providing 1 additional tree on the lot, or we're providing larger 2 trees. We felt that was fair. Environmental sustainability agreed with us. I would ask that you consider that in your potential approval with modifications. And that covered basically the tree save aspect of it. As far as the streets were concerned, we just felt like that's common sense. We're not proposing any new streets. We didn't feel like the frontage upgrades benefited anyone. It adds a maintenance cost to the city because, especially in our case, we're a state maintained road. They're going to come back and say that it's the city's responsibility to maintain the curb and to install the curb plus the storm drainage. It's one thing if you have a large development and you can absorb that cost among 50, 60 or more lots. When it's 7 lots, that cost just becomes a pass through to the homeowner, and we just feel like there's no public benefit and it's just a cost burden. So we felt like it was a fair removal to get rid of it. In our case, we do consider payment in lieu options for sidewalk when you do have sidewalks to nowhere. We're committing to install the sidewalk and actually extend it past the Duke Energy property to Vine Street so that it isn't a sidewalk to nowhere. We're looking to do that on a voluntary basis, but we feel like a sidewalk to nowhere is not a good thing, and we wanted to make sure that was included in the amendment.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Just to clarify, with respect to the tree preservation, and you were talking about what the Environmental Sustainability Board had recommended, and then the Planning Board modified that. Just to help clarify, the Environmental Sustainability Board wanted to incentivize preserving existing tree canopy, and
Sure.
their proposal gave 3 ways in which to do that. Go ahead.
So it wasn't necessarily 3 ways of promoting protection.
Mhm.
It was more of to make sure that the built up lot would have appeared to be better in the long term. So there's 2 trees already required by code. Their options were either add a 3rd tree. So in larger lots where you can fit a 3rd tree, that made sense. So you're providing more canopy in the long term. In smaller lots, we figured if you can only provide the 2 trees, provide them at a larger caliber, or provide 20% existing tree canopy.
And so what you're saying is basically they took the planning board took the 2nd and 3rd options, if you will.
Their recommendation is to plant more and plant them larger.
Yeah.
We felt like that was kind of a little more aggressive than necessary. But
so you said, well, you could plant more trees or you could plant
Or larger trees.
larger trees, and by combining it, they say, we want you to plant more larger trees.
And that was planning board's modification. Environmental sustainability was fine the way it was originally presented.
Okay.
But yeah.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Vesely?
All right, much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, hearing all that, I would entertain a motion to.
Just before we do that, one thing I want to point out, because we have some newer members. While we have an applicant who's got a development, and he talked about his development, obviously when we're doing zoning, what we do applies everywhere. So you have to think about, if we made this change, it would affect all properties, not just his property. That's a concrete example, but you can't focus just on the one. You have to say, if we were to do this, then all areas of the city, all residential, minor residential subdivisions would be entitled to the same thing. So I just want to point that out.
Well, with that in mind, I know Tiffany took that up as part of the equation and wrote the ordinance, taking that into consideration, I believe.
Yes, so when we reviewed this item, we actually took this conversation to our technical review committee to make sure that we were considering all sides of that. And so while what sparked this conversation may have been the strict application of our ordinance for that project, which led to the filing of the text amendment, we have seen infill development talk about challenges within the land development code to actually, realistically addressing some of the housing conversation that we have here in Belmont. And so we did take it to the TRC and said, hey, we have an application for this as one item to be addressed, and we got everyone's feedback. And the feedback that we received was that there were no problems as proposed because of it not being adjacent with anything else, and because it's written in a way that if there is adjacent infrastructure on either lot, the developer would still be required, even on a minor subdivision, to extend that along their frontage as well.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies for me, because I'm just going through my head to think about, let's say, the project which is already approved over there next to, across from Stowe Manor, right? I mean, you would want the continuation of the curb and gutter and potential sidewalks for the connectivity in that area.
Yes.
But I'm familiar with this area as well. It makes sense to what the request is. And I remind the council too, with the middle housing, we've discussed affordability, and this plays into that as an initiative to help with the affordability in our community with houses rising in prices. So
Right, because obviously minor subdivisions, 7 or fewer, we're not talking about the big ones that
higher price points.
Yeah.
But the Environmental Sustainability Board had no issues with this, as you mentioned, because I remember and it's true, we need to break it up between a larger developer and a smaller developer with the tree canopy, but that can also be very onerous on smaller developers, infill developers, to try to keep these. I've seen time and time again where we do this, and you get these big trees back there, and they end up dying anyway, they're falling over, right? So I'm good with it. I'm just kind of talking around to it.
Yes, and we involved the Environmental Sustainability Board as part of the discussion prior to the full draft of the amendment to really get their priorities understood by both the applicant and staff to help prepare the draft for consideration. And so they were actually a very helpful and integrated part of what you're seeing here presented tonight.
They usually give very good feedback on that kind of stuff.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you for the clarification.
No problem, thank you.
All right, then again, at this point, I would ask for a motion to come out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are out of public hearing. We move on to item 6, to consider the approval of the ordinance text amendment for minor subdivision requirements. I would note that the petitioner did ask for a modification of language, if you're so inclined.
So let's talk about that. So the modification is, do we just go with the environmental sustainability? If Tiffany, if someone could bring that one back up so that everyone could, it's 11.4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So do we go with the 3 options as originally recommended by the Environmental Sustainability Board, or with the planning board's green text, which is basically combining 2 and 3 into one requirement.
I don't know, I mean, Jim,
Well, I mean, I would think that the Environmental Sustainability Board are the experts on the matter.
I
and
would too.
They were fine with as originally proposed.
They were, and again, attribute a lot of, the Dell Web discussions to that board as well. As
Mhm.
they've brought that up, I believe, multiple times and discussed that. I mean, we have boards for a reason, right?
This is true.
I mean,
That was my
this
first
is their
initial thought.
passion. Some of these folks have experience in this area, so I would be inclined to trust their experience with that. My opinion.
I agree. Seems very logical on both fronts, the street improvements and the tree save. Again, to your point, even for other submissions that may involve similar facts and circumstances, I think that would apply there as well.
I guess I would move to approve with the one exception of adopting the Environmental Sustainability Board's original text on 11.4 and not the Planning Board's modification as to that specific provision.
Okay.
I'll second. Did
Go
you say?
ahead.
Oh, no. Jane.
The red text is staff.
Yeah.
The blue, or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. In this case, yes. The Environmental Sustainability Board agreed unanimously with the text as proposed in red, which was originally recommended by staff.
And
So
the
sorry for
green is what the Planning Board
confusion.
modified it.
Yes.
So it would,
So we're adopting the text in red.
Correct.
yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Right.
Yes.
All right, I heard a motion. I'm not sure if I heard a second.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
And I would also move that the proposed text amendment is reasonable and in the best interest of the public because it corrects an inconsistency in the Land Development Code and is consistent with the Comprehensive Land Use Plan goals, number 1, land use, number 6, infrastructure, and number 7, environment.
Oh, second, sorry.
All right, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 7, the 2024 Christmas Parade and tree lighting date change.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. I do not believe Boyce O'Toole is here at this time, but she's the president of the Montcross Area Chamber. And she brought this item to you all on January the 2nd, given that the parade float availability, I think there's like two float vendors out there, and she was asking, is it a possibility to move the Christmas parade to the Wednesday, the first Wednesday of December, instead of it typically being on the first Tuesday of December? Since that time, I think you all council directed her to look in to see if there are any more parade float vendors that were out there. There are not, and she's still having a hard time securing anyone else. So she wanted to bring back to that attention that I guess she needs to go ahead and secure the float vendor, and would like for you all to provide input on that, possibly with the date recommended for the Christmas.
I'll kick us off. I mean, I think my position has not changed on this. I still have the same sentiment that it should remain on Tuesday, as it has done in the past. We've always been able to manage with a successful parade. Again, for me, I just can't personally vote to move it. That's just my beliefs. I mean, I believe it's a free market. We can find a vendor, we can make shift, we can work around and create solutions here. I just don't think it's, in the best interest, in my opinion, of just saying, you know what, we're going to move it and throw our hands up. So that's just kind of my opinion on the matter.
Yeah, this is it's a tough topic for some folks, and I think the challenge here is we're not talking about a saturated market. We don't have, 15 different float vendors out there in this market that participate. And, apparently according to Boyce, back during COVID when we had that remote parade, we kind of lost our priority. And so given that I think you kind of couple that with some other surrounding towns that are also having their parades on that first Tuesday, and coupled with the fact that we heard some absolute horror stories with floats this year, with some folks getting stranded and we won't go into all the details there, but I just think that, I suppose we could always look at this on a year-by-year basis, but for this year, I would be in favor, again, if we're only talking about 2 vendors and one of those is perhaps not quite as credible as the other, I would feel more comfortable and more confident in the vendor being able to fulfill what they're saying they can do in terms of providing these floats for us. With moving, I think that would also benefit our downtown businesses if we also choose to move the tree lighting to Tuesday night versus the Monday night, because we don't have a lot of businesses open on Monday evenings.
I do have a question, I'm sorry. Do we, or does Montcross, do they provide the float vendors for every person, or could I individually go and find my own float vendor and submit a request to be in the parade? Is it solely umbrellaed under one vendor, or how does that work?
I don't think it is, because if you think about it, there's certain floats that are customized, whereas I don't believe that's
I mean, could you
No,
make...
I understand that. I'm just saying, like, for example, let me think of, like, Caramont. They use a float through whatever preferred vendor Voice is using. But does Dance Specialties use that same preferred vendor? Can people call and get their own float is what I'm asking. Businesses.
I don't see why they wouldn't be able to.
I was like, well, can't people make their own? I mean,
Yeah,
when I was in high school, we made our own floats for like the homecoming parade and everything.
I know it seems silly that we're debating over a date, but
I mean,
citizens hold true to tradition, and I hate that it's in our hands as a council. I feel like this is a Montcross decision that is truly being made that we're having to vote on to provide these people floats. I do agree with Jason. Maybe this needs to be on a year-to-year basis. Am I genuinely for it? No, honestly, I don't. I hate that we have to move a date because of a vendor.
That was my thing, is moving a date based on the performance of the vendor, because I don't know anything about the new vendor that we're going to go with, but who's to say they're not going to be any better? And then we'll just have moved the
is
date.
this going to deter people from being in the parade? Is pretty much where I was going. If we say, no, we're going to keep it, and this preferred vendor doesn't have but 5 floats, and we have 17 businesses that want to have a float, like, is this going to deter them from being in the parade because they don't want to make a makeshift float? Like, what is this going to put us as far as like the production of the amount of people that partake in the Belmont parade? For me, we would make shift. We'll figure it out. We always do. But in hindsight, like, it's not about me. You said Boyce, she couldn't be here tonight.
That's the way I understand. That's what the mayor said.
I think
a conflict.
We've got some pretty big questions, I think, to still have answered on this decision. I don't know that it's something we can make without having some answers to some of those questions. I mean, it's like, for instance, how far in advance do you have to secure these floats? So if we didn't use that vendor that's so booked for 2024, but we wanted to secure them for 2025, is it first come, first serve? Can we go ahead and line up with them for 2025 and, do something alternatively this year, whether it's moving the date or going to another vendor. Right. But I don't know how we can say that from now on, we have to change the date or go with an alternative vendor. Like, these multi-year contracts, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know whether either Richard or Miles can answer this, but my understanding was we have been going with a vendor, and that vendor is having a hard time giving us the floats
because Mooresville's
because
parade is the
of
same
Mooresville. So if we change the date, we continue with the vendor that we've been using. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if we kept the date, here's my other question, because I understand what both of you all are saying, that there is another vendor if we kept the date, but they're not as reputable. And so, I guess the question is, if that's an either or, if the options are either we change the date and go with a reputable vendor, or we keep the date and go with a non-reputable vendor, then I think I land where Jason is. But the question is that an either or question? I mean, if we keep it on Tuesday, do we necessarily have to use that disreputable vendor, or can we make,
I think that was the original question.
Yeah.
That was brought up last time, is why should we move our date just to accommodate a private entity? I mean, we're talking about something that's happened for 70 plus years, and we're talking about changing it. I mean, it might sound petty to people listening, but I mean, I'm one that we should probably stick with tradition. Belmont folks are going to make it happen. I mean, if we got to make our own floats, I'm sure people are going to make their own floats.
That's kind of what I was trying to understand. If Boyce books these floats for the businesses, or do the businesses book their own float? Do we know that answer?
The businesses, go ahead. The businesses reach out to Boyce to secure a float. Right. They make money off of that. They act as agent or vendor for the city of Belmont.
Yeah.
But I think if somebody wants to create a float, I think as long as it's legal to drive on the street, a trailer, for example, as long as it's licensed and tagged and it can, legally be pulled behind another vehicle.
And it's not going to catch on fire.
It's not going to catch on fire, of course. Yeah, that would be allowed.
That must be a new criteria.
Yeah, because right now you see people pulling boats, and people are inside of boats, and you see people pulling like U-Haul. U-Haul trailers, and they're in the back of U-Haul trailers and things like that. So I think as long as it's legal, then they manage our contract for us for the parade. So if we say we want to have this vendor, plus we want other folks to
can we have more than one vendor? I mean, can we not just use the company?
I don't see why we wouldn't, right?
That's what's kind of blowing my mind right now.
Is working on that.
I don't know. They may ask for an exclusive. Who knows? But I just think. I mean, I know she wants to secure these contracts, but I mean, to your point, I think there's some questions that would be good to know before we make this.
I just feel the longer we wait, though, the more we may be backing ourselves into a corner by having to make one decision without the other. I mean, I think we give a direction tonight, and if the flag is, if it's not going the way that intended, then, I mean, revisit it, right? I mean.
Well, I guess if we were to go that route, my question would be, okay, that gives us a potential solution for 2024. Are we going to be in the same predicament next year? Are we going to be last in line with this same vendor?
But we've never had this issue. That's what I guess I'm just not comprehending.
Well, because we were near the top, from what I understand, we were near the top of the priority list because we had such history with this one vendor. We lost that priority during COVID. So what's going to happen, if we stick with the date, we go with an alternative vendor, but we want to revert back to the one we've worked with for all these decades, supposedly, then.
I'm wondering if we had an issue last year or the year prior.
Like this most recent one?
Sure. With this vendor. Or I guess if Mooresville changed their date and they were up,
Well, one question I can't answer. There was some discussion about who had the responsibility for the date, whether it was Montcross or the city. The determination was made that this is a city-sanctioned event. It's a city parade. The Montcross Chamber acts as vendor for us, so any date change would be the responsibility of the city. So that's why we are taking up that question.
This is not something we can take up at retreat, right, to vote on?
It's up to you all.
It's a public meeting. You notice it.
Yeah. I'd just like to have her here to answer some of these questions, to the extent she can, answer some of these questions before we, I mean, even if we voted to stay on the date, on the first Tuesday, I mean, next year, we're still going to be dealing with, being last on the list with this preferred vendor. And we're only talking about, if we could do it at the retreat, we're only talking about what, a week and a half?
That's assuming we get Boyce there, right?
Yeah.
All right, so staff has no recommendation on this, so to move things along, is this an item that we vote on, or was this informational only?
The intent was so that you could have a decision whether it would be December 3rd or December 4th. If you want to continue it to the retreat, we ask Boyce, can she attend? For more information, I think that could be the motion.
Well, let me, I don't know whether the main, Bill, can you answer any of these questions?
Okay.
Come on down.
So, good evening, Mayor and Council. A couple of questions that were asked, I can answer kind of my understanding as far as why the date and are you automatically locked in. Belmont was automatically locked in with the date, the second or the first Tuesday, our date. But then with COVID, that shifted, and then the way that the Tuesdays fell. And so then we kind of got locked in with the other date. And so in moving, the vendor, whereas Montcross usually rents 15 or the floats, and to kind of answer your question, they put the floats on their website, and someone can choose which float they want and rent it. So the date, the new date, or if we want to keep it on the Tuesday, instead of having 15 floats available, there's only maybe 5 or 6 floats available with the reputable company. There is another company as well. So, but if we were to stick with the Tuesday date with the reputable company, there would only be a smaller, amount of floats available. So those could be selected, but also, yes, other floats could be rented if one of the hospitals wanted to bring in a different float. Yes, they could do that as well.
So is this going to be a recurring thing, do you think? I mean, since we lost that priority during COVID, I mean, is there potential that we could regain that priority at some point in the future?
Potentially, yes.
And we only can use just one vendor.
That was Mike. So
no, I do not think so. That's just they have been kind of the choice vendor, with the other one maybe not having as great a reputation, but I do not know. I mean, so Montcross may not say we're going to have two vendors on their website for you to choose from, but they could say we have these 5 or 6 floats, and then if you don't select one of these, you could reach out to this other vendor on your own and reserve a float from them and allow it to come in, or create your own with Jim.
I will not be creating any more floats.
Now, if they did that second option and you had the five businesses lock those in, and then you have 10 more businesses that need a float, do you guys lose on the back end with them purchasing the floats individually?
And when you say on the back end,
Do you guys make money off of?
I would still charge a float fee.
Okay, good. So you guys wouldn't lose if they did do that.
Well, I'm not a part of the Montcross.
Montcross, I'm sorry.
So if Claremont Hospital did not get one of the selected floats from the reputable company, but they wanted a professional float, they could then rent one from another company, but they would still pay a fee to Montcross to enter their float.
Understood.
Just like, with your with your football.
Sure.
You
I
pay
just
a
wanted to make
fee
sure.
and insert your float, so they would still pay a fee. So they would not lose out.
Okay, that's all I care about.
Can we not use company 1 that we've always used and then use the non-reputable company to backfill
And
any
not
additional
change the
orders
date.
so that we can then build up a reputation with them?
How are we classifying Company B as a non-reputable?
That's what I don't understand. What are
I
we
guess
doing?
I don't understand.
Yeah, I would move to let's refer to them as Company B.
Because at the end of the day, you got 2 companies. Just
I thought I remembered some commentary about that in her presentation there, that there was some concern over Company B, and it may just have been not lack of familiarity
easier to deal with
them.
You said easier to deal with?
I guess I'm just assuming, as in everything, it might be easier for me to deal with you versus Councilman Jason.
So option A is we can choose Wednesday versus Tuesday, and we have the Company 1.
that will have all the floats available. Or option B, we can keep the date as is, have 2 vendors to choose floats from, and move forward as normal.
You know, I believe it should be option B.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap it up.
You're pretty confident that even if we keep it on Tuesday, from what you know about this, that we could at least get, say, 5 or 6 floats from our.
Correct. There were still
preferred-
floats available, just limited amount compared to what they would normally reserve.
From company one.
From company one.
How many floats did we get last year?
I think it was like
I'm
15.
guessing like 15. But then because I think it was at Mooresville, the other community that has some reserve that date, I mean, it was just a smaller, like 5 or 6 that were going to be available.
I mean, I'm fine with that approach. We could always take this up again next year if it becomes an issue with taking that approach with multiple vendors.
With all of that information received, I'd like to go ahead and call the question and ask for a motion.
I'll make the motion to keep it as is on Tuesday.
So, sorry, what about the time change? Because that was the other part of it.
Yeah, there was a time change element to this as well.
They would ask.
I think it was a 30-minute time change.
Yeah,
I don't think it was
I will motion to accept that recommendation because I believe it was for the safety at the end of the day.
Traffic flow.
I think it was for clearing out the traffic sooner for Park and Keener Boulevard, I believe.
And for clarity, it was 30 minutes earlier.
3 o'clock.
3 p.m.
Yeah. So, that's a benefit, right? I mean,
so you want to make a full motion?
I'll make the motion to keep it on the current date schedule and move it up 30 minutes.
To 3 p.m.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
All right, our next item is the J. Paul Ford Center facility use discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Just as a recap from the October 2nd, 2023 City Council meeting, you all directed staff to work with the Main Street Economic Vitality Committee and a commercial real estate broker and discuss the potential best uses for the Ford Center, if leased, and bring this back at this time for discussion. Since this time, we did engage the EV committee and a commercial real estate broker, and both reports are included inside your packet. For the EV committee, Al Wall and Joe Jordan are co-chairs of that committee, and I believe Al is here so that he can answer any questions that may arise. Also for Mecca Commercial Real Estate, we have Sam Klein sitting in the front row. He's actually toured the property and has given you all a market report, the proposed lease rates, lease comps, if you all would like to go that route as well. And he's also shared his agreement for a commercial real estate broker and his listing agreement, if you all like to move forward with that. So I'm not going to rehash what's inside your packet. Both reports are in here. There's 2 different options there, so I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, for further discussion.
All right, why don't we begin with the EV committee? Would you all have questions? We want Al, Mr. Wall, to come and approach the microphone if you have questions.
Yeah, and maybe you might want to give like a brief summary or something like that.
Is Al still here?
Is Al still here?
In the bathroom.
Al left.
Al left. Is there anyone from the EV committee that can stand in? Okay. It's a busy night for you, Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Church. I am the Main Street and DBDA chair and also a member of the EV committee. Any questions?
Any questions for Jennifer regarding the proposal? I think it's a proposal to make an art facility primarily.
Yeah, the council asked for a recommendation in the EV committee. We gave, as you can see in your packets, we gave 3 options, sale of the property, lease of the property, but we're also very interested in creating an art space in that building, as mentioned during public comment.
Can you potentially talk about opportunities with grant funds? Because I think one of the previous discussions was the capital outlay for fixing up the building. So.
Yeah, we've got all our committees working on this right now, and so we'd like to, if you have some interest and you have some vision, we'd like to have some time to gather some more grant information and some grant funding to present to you. We'd like to do that perhaps in a workshop setting, to give everyone some time give us time to present some grant funding. We'd like to look for grants, which we're already gathering information, and that is one of the focuses of our organization committee, to look for funding, sponsorships for our events, and also for funding for items like this. And so we would appreciate some time to present that to you, if you have any interest.
Well, under your proposal, let me ask you, there's no change in use. It's still grandfathered in under its original classification. So there are no required upfits at this time.
There would be no, thank you, yeah, there'd be no required upfits. It is, I believe, use is still community use, as it has been for so many years. There'd be no required upfits. I believe there was a presentation in October, Miles, by Brian Skiba, and he spoke to that as well. We understand that there would be some improvements needed to make it ADA compliant. Several of us have walked through that building numerous times and understand the need for that. And so we would probably look to the city for discussion on possible assistance for that. But at the same time, we would also look for some grant funding to assist with that as well, and some local endowments as well.
Miles, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to state just that there may need to be ADA improvements in the facility. Once council decides which direction they want to go, if it needs to be an art space or a community use space, I would like to bring Skiba back in to specifically ask him those questions regarding here's what council's considering versus it being open-ended right now with art space. We don't know what art space may be in my mind. So I'd like to dive down into it just a little bit further, filter that down, and then ask Skiba, his staff, what would be the requirements for upfits.
Well, let me ask you one question. I've been approached by some citizens on this. Now, if it were to become an art space, could it be also an art space / meeting space? Because some of the folks in town were concerned about being able to hold meetings in our facility here at the rate of $80 an hour when they had been using the Ford Center for a considerably less rate. And, I understand that approach. I mean, not everybody can come out of pocket for $80 an hour.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, when we started visioning around the Ford Center, I spoke with Zip, with Parks and Rec, and he actually shared that with me, and he asked the same question. Said, believe it or not, we've got this large space across the street, and we're still out of meeting space on the weekends. And so asked if we could do that. And our vision for this space is to keep that large open room open and divide it off with moving walls or some concept similar to that. The only space that would be dedicated at this time would be, there's a large space in the back, and we'd like to dedicate that to pottery and sculpting. And you'd need a kiln, a dedicated space, and so that space would be dedicated specifically for that. We've talked to Janine Dibble with Art by Jay, and she would be very interested in not only supplying the kiln, which she has and cannot use at her current location, but also to supply a teacher that she's got working for her. So what an opportunity for that. And that's, one thing I liked about this space and this use is we're not competing with Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec has so many wonderful programs, but mostly athletic-based, as I said earlier. And so this speaks to those people in our community, kind of on the creative side, and gives them an opportunity. And I think it's good for the community. And I really like the idea of utilizing seniors as instructors. And we've talked to so many people who have indicated that they would be interested in doing that, some seniors that would be interested in helping us with that. So that's pretty exciting.
I think it's a pretty cool idea. I remember previous discussions, the council at the time, again, I want to keep, because I don't want to speak for anyone who's new, was to retain the property because it is an asset, considering its location in downtown Belmont. This council, or the previous council, was never able to come up with a use. We talked about leasing. I mean, I think it's great that our volunteer board is bringing this and proposing this to us. There's a lot of things that can be shared in art. In high school, I actually volunteered with Ms. Dibble for the Holy Angels group for art upstairs in the general store when I was in high school. So I think there's a lot of cool opportunities and community outreach that could be performed by this. And thank you to the board for
Yeah.
taking this on their own and doing this. I think
You're
it's
welcome.
great.
Yeah, and we just like some consideration. If you have any interest in this, then we'd like to have some additional time to get some specific grant opportunities, speak to people in the community about endowments. Of course, we've all been doing that already and working behind the scenes, and then to present, our findings in a workshop perhaps. And then if we've been unable to secure enough grant funding, then perhaps the city moves in another direction. We'd like an opportunity just for some time to do that. Everyone's pretty excited about it, and we'd like to partner with you all on it if you have any interest.
I mean, last comment, like Miles said, could we ask for almost like a business plan from the committee?
Absolutely.
To showcase what the idea and vision is.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we'd have to have a business plan in order to secure grant funding, of course. So we'd have to have that done.
I think it's great.
Anything else? Well, thank you for stepping in for
Thank
Al.
Is this
And
required?
I would just say, just for balance, I would invite Mr. Klein up to give us his vision or report.
All right, here I am.
Are there any questions for Mr. Klein? I mean, I think you're looking at it, marketing it as an asset to business, commercial uses.
Yeah, I mean, routinely, I do 95% of my transactions in Gaston County, and I'd say 2 to 3 times a week I'll get a call from someone requesting space in Belmont, and we just have no product. So taking this product to the market, your upfit expenses could probably be privatized, and it would generate, I think, a really nice revenue stream for the city. So it'll take a little bit of time. It's unique, but it's really well located. To me, the easiest thing was either fitness or office, but you never know. Sometimes you put something out in the market and you're surprised by who shows interest and who's willing to come in. And I think the other really nice piece, I've done this multiple times in Mount Holly with leasing, is that you guys don't pay taxes and your insurance carrier is so inexpensive, it's not worth invoicing for. So you can kind of compress some of the typical commercial pass-through costs and offer a really good product. And so we could get the interior fixed up again by probably some discount rent and what we call rent abatement. And, someone would be using the facility, and you're also inviting someone into the community who's probably going to generate jobs, goodness, etc.
I'm interested, you said you think the upfit can be privatized, because that, I think, is my biggest concern, is that, I know we might have some ADA compliance costs regardless, but it seemed like there might be more if there's a change in use.
Yeah.
And is that something that, whether through rent abatement or whatever, those costs make it unfeasible or not economically feasible to rent it out, that we're not really making any money because of all the costs to upfit?
Well, no, I think that you would push that cost back on the person who wants to use it.
Mm-hmm. But are we going to have to offer them rent abatement to make that not, does that make it not profitable or not?
Oh, well, absolutely. But I mean, even if you gave away a year,
mm-hmm.
but someone came in and spent $200,000 on the building,
mm-hmm.
and then began to pay you rent, you would eventually run into a revenue stream. I wouldn't lease it for less than 5 years. So you would lock in a 5-year revenue stream, and you wouldn't necessarily part with any funds to
mm-hmm.
fix the building.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, aren't budgeted, I don't believe, anyway.
No, we removed that from
yes.
the budget. Yeah.
And at the end of that 5 years, you would think that the building's been renovated for the next user, if that user's not the next one, so you could rent for another 5-year period.
If I was representing the tenant, I wouldn't dare let them sign a 5-year lease that they didn't have the option to renew, having spent $200,000, etc. So, you would, if you move to keep it without generating rent, you're just using it for community-based activities, obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know that delaying the revenue stream is really that bad for a city. It's not generating any revenue right now.
Anything else, Mr. Klein? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so staff is seeking direction on this. So you've got two options here. So I'd ask, are you prepared to offer direction this evening? Jennifer introduced the possibility of seeking grants, which may also help upfit the building, which is relatively new to me, that option.
In my opinion, let's see if the grants provide anything into fruition. You know, I mean, maybe there's something out there for what their proposal is. And in that, you know, then we get to potentially have it upfitted with someone else's money, right? I mean, so, and then we still have it at our disposal, right? I mean, we then can also control the asset. I mean, I also like the lease opportunity, right? I mean, you know, it does provide income in perpetuity at X amount of or X date or whatever once the tenant receives an ROI on it. So that's also advantageous to the city. But, you know, we've asked the question, the questions we come to this council before in the past is, are we, you know, in the real estate market?
Yeah.
Or are we in providing development and community engagement to our residents?
That's right.
So I think it's, you know, clear into that.
That's exactly right.
But that's just my 2 cents.
I think that's a fair approach. See what they come back with their research on the grant side, and then we can weigh it then.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the direction of staff is we are going to put this on hold until we hear back from the EV committee as to what they've discovered with grant opportunities. Is that fair?
For me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then I guess that issue is resolved. Since you're just looking for direction, there's no vote. So I'm going to check that from our list and move into item number 9, which is our quarterly finance update.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I want to hand out these audit reports that were delivered to you last week, just for your light reading.
Fresh off the press. Huh?
This is not in relation to anything we're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Cumberry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Quiz is going to follow.
That's right. So, yeah.
This is upgraded. I like this better.
Yeah. All right, so we'll jump right in. I know this is a little bit small, but it was included in your packet. So we'll first talk about revenue. Ad valorem tax revenue as a percentage of the year. I don't know if you guys recall, but at the last quarter update, it was looking below as a percentage of the year, but that's because our peak collection time for property tax revenue is during the winter months. So really good shape there. Intergovernmental revenue is right on par with percentage of the year. Intergovernmental includes local option sales tax, utility franchise tax, beer and wine tax, and PAL bill distributions. Just a little update on our sales tax. We are currently averaging about $437,000 per month in sales tax distributions. In order to meet our budget, we need to average $372,000. So really good shape there.
It is, because we were concerned about where that was going to go.
We took a risk. We took,
Yeah.
well, not a risk, but we made a bet that it would outperform. So
Yeah.
that is nice.
Yeah, so I mean, it is highly volatile. You'll see it go up and down. It's, you know, a little bit 10% less in November than October, but it could jump 10% over December. So no concern there. Other general fund revenue includes grants, recreation fees, and interest on investment. Our interest on investment has done really well this year. I think last year our audited figures closed at just north of $300,000 across all funds, and we're already over $250,000 halfway through the year. So we're doing really well as far as our capital management and cash management. Any questions on general fund revenue before I move on to water sewer? Okay. Water sewer fund, pretty straightforward. Water sewer charges are on par for the year. As far as other operating revenue, that would include service connections, penalties, and system development fees. Those are in good shape too. Non-recurring revenue, which is basically just the fund balance appropriation that we budgeted for, at approximately 1.2 million. We have not had to tap into that yet, which is why that variance is looking significant. So basically, our water sewer fund has been operating with current revenue, basically 50-50. So really good shape there. And then fund balance appropriation, that $600,000 was for the river mist reimbursement. Any questions on water sewer? And stormwater, those fees are coming in as expected, right on line with halfway through the year. We're at just north of 50%. Any questions on stormwater? And we'll move over to the expenses. I want to commend our department heads and staff for really doing a good job of monitoring their budgets themselves before they even put requisitions in. Obviously, I monitor that. If I see something come in that we may be overexpending in a specific budget line item, I'll consult with those department heads, and we've done a really good job collaborating on keeping a balanced budget. Planning and zoning is up as a percentage of the year, but do keep in mind that we have the comprehensive land use plan that we're going to be expending over the next few months. So you'll see that drop down a little bit. Sanitation, we're building a month in arrears on that, so no concern. We're still going to continue that trend throughout the rest of the year. And debt service, we do have some payments that we just expensed. This is through 12/31, so we just had some payments hit in January, so you'll expect that budget percentage to come down as well as for the third quarter update. Any questions on general fund? Okay, water sewer fund. The only note here is just the capital, and again, that goes back to the river mist reimbursement. So majority of that 700,000, 720,000 that's been expensed to date was related to that. The other 120,000 spent is for the North Belmont booster pump station.
How's that coming, by the way? Do we have a date for that?
Yeah, I don't have an update on that as far as the
You talking about the
project
North
completion.
Belmont
booster
Pump? We have an update. If you just give us just a little bit.
Sure.
Any other questions on water sewer? And stormwater, as a percentage of the year, looking great there. As you can see, we're 17% above. So we're bringing in more additional fees than what we're currently spending, but that's not a bad thing. As CIP projects come available and we roll money into fund balance, we'll be able to tap into that to complete infrastructure and stormwater projects in the future.
Okay.
Any questions on stormwater?
I don't think so.
Okay. I did want to give an update on our fund balance percentage as a percent of expenditures. After tonight's budget amendments, as we've appropriated funding for the rec center closeout, the Greystone Estates street lighting agreement, and then the streets equipment. Even with those appropriations, we are still at 54%. Let's hope for another good one.
Quick question for you, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at the retreat because I think multiple people added this, but the $10 million that we're receiving from the state for the water and sewer project, is that reimbursed or is that going to, okay, so that is not a $10 million check that's going to be immediately deposited.
Right, that's
Well,
correct.
well, I thought, didn't Representative Loftus show up with one?
I don't think we deposited that.
Yeah.
This obviously shows we didn't deposit
That's
that.
correct.
But that's a
Yes.
reimbursement program,
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. And so we'll identify projects. We'll probably talk about that during the budget process about projects that we want to tap into that funding for.
Yep.
But yes, it is reimbursement
It's not
based.
going to last very long.
No, and I just, the only reason why I bring that up is because if you look at the revenues over there, you might not see it in there, right? So I just want to call it out. It's there.
Sure.
We're going to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make
point.
that a call out.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate this, Jared. This is awesome. And really good news, too.
Yeah. Great.
Because again, we provided what, the 2-cent tax cut, or was it 3-cent tax cut? 3-cent
Three
tax
over 2
cut
years.
this previous fiscal budget review.
Thank you.
All right, so that will bring us to item 10, which was moved from the consent agenda to Chronicle parking lot. Question.
Yes, and I might ask Tiffany to step up to the podium to help me out with this one because it goes back for some period of time. But what I've seen as far as the emails that were generated and shared with me was that, like I said, it was agreed upon. It was by prior administration, prior planning staff. A shared parking is allowed by right in the Land Development Code. This requires proof of an agreement. I read that as well.
Yes.
And so really this kind of just formalizes what had occurred prior. And so we're trying to put this all generated into an actual agreement. You want to provide any more information?
Sure. So the Chronicle Mill conditional zoning was approved in November of 2019. The development applicant had then had some discussions with the city about the possibility of utilizing the 85 Catawba lot to help facilitate meeting their agreed upon parking requirements as a part of that conditional zoning. And so just for some context, while we are talking about a portion of the parking lot that is on city property, that parking lot was not expanded or anything. The city purchased that lot in 2004, and there was already pavement in the same locations as is currently, and that was upgraded by the developer. So they did not expand that use on city property. There was no conversation or intention of doing so, but they did ask previous administration for the possibility of utilizing that area, and it was agreed upon. And so what they're asking for now is to formalize that agreement. So it was discussed, and then financial decisions on their end were made to carry out the construction of their project. And right now, all we're looking to do is button that up into an agreement to help solidify things that were already discussed during the development approvals. Yes.
So just real quick, and obvious, that was a very different council at that time, right?
Sure.
To understand this, nothing was ever formalized or signed, correct?
That is correct, and that is what is before you tonight. So as a part of zoning, one of the things that we're charged with is ensuring zoning compliance. So it was communicated that this would be a requirement, and now the applicant is asking for you all's consideration to finalize this communicated requirement. So we're in that stage of making sure that before we fully release the project, we know that people are living there now and everything else, but before we authorize full zoning compliance of the site, the developer is working on buttoning up a few of remaining items that are on our to-do list. This is one of those, and so that is why it's coming before you now.
You made a comment in regards to the existing parking shared as is, right? By us going into this agreement, I mean, meaning as in anybody could use it, right? Parking, anybody can park in that today, correct? And that these 22 spots, anybody can park in it, correct?
That is my understanding because it's on city property, so we haven't allowed any signage or anything like that. It was specifically communicated from the email records that I have that they could count those spaces towards meeting their zoning compliance requirements for the number of parking spaces for their property. And keep in mind that that was not the only space, right? It's a combination of multiple spaces in order to make sure that there's sufficient parking for the approved building.
So they were counting on the city to, at some point in the future, grant use of these 22 spaces so that they could gain their certificate of zoning compliance.
They asked, and that was the direction that they received from the city at the time of the request being made, and they proceeded accordingly.
I feel like that might have, I mean, again, hindsight 2020 probably should have been something that was signed at that time, because here's my concern. Today they can park in it. There's 22 spots. Residents can park there. I can park there. Anybody can park there. If we enter into this agreement, we're going to see signs go up, right, to Chronicle residents only, more than likely?
It depends. It's up to council's discretion on the agreement. So if there's something that you would like to add to the agreement, at the end of the day, what they're seeking is an agreement from you to understand how they can utilize these spaces to meet compliance. If one of the conditions that council would like to see is that there's no signs for exclusive use, that would be something that would need to be further discussed with the applicant.
I mean, I think for me, that's probably the route forward here because we already have a parking issue in downtown Belmont.
Doesn't that work against them, though, in terms of the calculation for the certificate? If they don't have exclusive use of those 22 spaces?
My agreement doesn't specify exclusive use, you can count public parking towards your required parking spaces. So it doesn't, as long as the city's comfortable moving forward in that direction.
I mean, it's just, I'm hesitant to give up any city-owned parking
Sure.
right now. It's such a,
And I will say for clarity, while it is technically located on city-owned property, that portion, those spaces have never been advertised or utilized as public parking from my understanding. That paved area has always been fully utilized from what our records can tell by the 85 Catawba building. It's just where the parcel lineage was drawn
but we are
whenever that was
considering-
subdivided.
But we are considering adding another lot immediately adjacent to that.
Sure, it would be adjacent. The property boundary that's proposed for the lease agreement does not overlap or impact that as it's currently designed, but you are right, it is on the same parcel.
Is that, I wonder, so are those 22 spaces not included in the proposed plan for that surface lot that we're talking about?
No.
This is
No,
totally
they're not.
separate. So that's
So this
actually
is
more
good
space
news,
that we could
right?
add to.
Yeah. Again, to go back, I think, Jason, you're also agreeing here. I don't feel comfortable privatizing these. There are lots. They should be open up to the public. And privatize meaning putting up Chronicle resident-only parking signs there. Maybe we retool it, I don't know. But I believe you made a comment in regards to those residents can use that parking anyways. So I don't really see the necessity of making a exclusive parking spot for.
And if it was public, they could still use it.
Correct.
As long as you are comfortable, one of the requirement from them is to have a shared parking agreement that allows for them to formalize the ability to use those spaces because they do not own the land that those spaces are sitting on. So however we draft the language within that agreement, that is what zoning is looking for in order to establish zoning compliance. This agreement doesn't authorize zoning compliance, but it would be added towards their overall parking criteria so that we can then issue that documentation.
And without that being added to their overall criteria, they would not get the certificate of zoning completion.
That is correct.
Would they have to seek parking or purchase land somewhere ultimately to meet that criteria?
Staff would need to go back and look at that, but because of the conditions of approval, we would be limited as to where we would be able to authorize additional off-site if it wasn't coming back for you for further relief, because there is a distance requirement that all off-site parking needs to be within, and so the spaces surrounding that property directly adjacent as options are very limited.
Did somebody mention when this was discussed during the business meeting, did somebody say that they improve? I know you said they didn't expand it. Did they improve it?
They did, and so after receiving direction from the city that they were able to utilize those spaces, the applicant has repaved the entirety of the lot, including the lots that are, or the parking spaces that are on city property, improved and in some cases added sidewalk along Chronicle Street for access, added ADA crossings and a mid-block crossing striping, and they are also currently coordinating a rapid flashing beacon to formally finalize that mid-block crossing in order to make sure that pedestrian access across the street is safe for anyone who's utilizing that lot.
But just to call out to that point, you've got Del Webb that's about to build the South Fork Parkway. So, I mean, the Chronicle, and this has been discussed in the past, may or may not have paid their fair share in road improvements. Generally, we require new developers to build road improvements, intersection improvements, walkability. I mean, I would see this no different as paving a parking lot that they're probably already using today for the benefit of their residents to sell. So, I mean, again, I don't feel comfortable putting resident parking only on city-owned parking spots where we have a parking issue today.
What was conveyed previously? What was their expectation based on what we emailed them?
I am pulling that up right now, please bear with me.
It wasn't formalized.
Well, that's true, but there's a stopple.
I think I know where you're going with that, with the improvements.
Mm-hmm. They're over reliance-based. If they did something in reliance, I don't know if we can come in and say and change the deal when they expended money in reliance.
And I apologize. I think those emails might be right on my desk right there. Bear with me 1 second. Let me see.
notwithstanding the improvements that they made and notwithstanding the decisions that were made by prior councils, I don't like the idea of us having to bail out a developer because of poor planning on the front end, relying on 22 spaces that they needed to get their certificate. Especially when parking is at such a premium already. And when we're saying that it's not quote unquote downtown parking, well, we're talking about adding overflow parking right next to it. And this presumably could be added to those spaces that we're
But
considering.
the overflow parking, one of the stipulations was that that was not going to be overnight parking, right?
Right.
Yeah, because what if we could piggyback off of that scenario with the overflow parking? I mean, I kind of wish we would have known this at the workshop.
Did you find it?
Sure. So I found the email, and there may be more, but the one that I think is most directly pointed and related to this is dated back from December 2019, where Armada Hoffler, who is the applicant or developer working on the Chronicle Mill project, notes, "We've been working hard to solve our parking problem and have found a solution. We have placed the Blair property across the street, which is 85 Catawba, under contract since it is overparked and has some additional city-owned parking on the back of the lot. Previous city manager confirmed that the code allows us to do a parking share to use those counts in ours. I believe there's some allowance for sharing the counts for daytime and nighttime uses, which we would expect to only need that overflow in the evenings when the office at 85 Catawba is closed, since the apartments tend to need so much less parking during the day. Previous city manager also confirmed that we can use the small city-owned section in the back if we sign a parking share agreement that is supposed to be on the website. And so it is based off of those conversations that the applicant has continued to move forward to be able to utilize those spaces and made investments both financially and in the rest of the property to bring the project to fruition, with the understanding that they would be able to meet their zoning compliance as it relates to parking, utilizing the lot, including the city-owned portion that's directly across from 85 Catawba. There are no accesses to those parking spaces through the city parcel. Those are all through the land that's currently owned by the 85 Catawba property. So doesn't mean that the parking spaces themselves are not on city property. They are. There are 22 spaces accessed via the other lot that are now fully located on property that has been purchased by the city as part of the property acquisition in 2004. But it is because of the communications back in 2019 that the applicant is now seeking to button up formally the agreement, not just with a conversation, but with a full lease agreement with the city to allow them to utilize those spaces and check off items that are being required by the planning department for full zoning compliance.
Parks. What do you think?
It depends.
That's a great legal answer.
I like that answer.
There, you know, there's an area law called betterments where you improve someone else's property and you can get claim for reimbursement for that. What I worry more about is if they acquired vested rights claim, common law vested rights by and expended funds based on assurances that were given and leading toward a written document. I mean, it seems to me they may have a.
Now, does that?
And if you shut them out from getting their zoning approval, now they don't have another avenue to pursue that. This was the one they were counting on. That seems like that puts them in a corner that they may that might cause some concern for me.
Assurances received by who? Staff or council? Because there was
Staff.
nothing codified by council.
Staff.
Does any of that hinge one way or another on this sort of like exclusive possession or ability to post signs and keep people out?
don't know, what their reaction to that would be. That's something that, if council was inclined to, had an appetite to approve this, with that being part of the agreement, then you could instruct staff to go down that road and see if that would be acceptable.
All right. I'm not willing to cut them out. I think there's, like you said, there might be vested interest. There's been betterments. There's a reliance interest. I think we need to live up to what was, whether we agree with it or not, those are the expectations that were created. However, I don't know if we need to, I think it would still count, for lack of a better term, even if there was no, keep out, this is for Chronicle only. If it's a shared parking agreement, it's a shared parking agreement. Does that affect any sort of liability or does that alter that equation if we said we don't?
I think it was the city that, when this was being negotiated, suggested a lease might be a better form. I may be wrong about that.
Who holds the liability there? Is there like a hold harmless?
It's all in the lease, I think.
And one of those considerations, and certainly by far not the only one, is when the city has the lot and it's a public lot owned by the city, there are some requirements for stormwater for ongoing maintenance and record keeping as it relates to that, which are not required if the property is leased and maintained by the lessee.
I think I was the one that suggested a lease.
Well, if that's true, Tiffany, I mean, have we been in default of our own requirements since this lot has been?
No, because this lot has never been advertised or utilized as a public lot, from my understanding.
Okay. Let me ask you this lease, when was this lease created?
About a month ago.
Yeah, we've reviewed it for parks a couple months ago, back and forth with the.
It's been back and forth for several months.
Back and forth between staff and
the applicant as well.
Legal staff and Armada Hopper.
Okay, so for the past month, we've been several months, we've been creating the terms of something that dates back to 2019. All right, so in here, what were the initial expectations? Because this lease, if we sign it, are good to 2028, has the option for 2 5-year riders, carrying the lease out to 2038. So I guess 2 questions. I mean, is that something that we added? Was that something that they had expectations of during initial conversations? Was a 12 or 13-year lease? And what happens to their certificate once these 2 riders expire by 2038? Are they in some sort of default position for parking?
Or if we sell the property in the interim and they lose those spaces, does that?
There's a provision, I think, for that
Yes.
somewhere in the lease.
There is, and so my understanding of the way that the lease is set up is just like most other things, when we determine zoning compliance, we determine that as a point in time. And so if there are conditions that change on the site after that point in time determination that would then make a property out of compliance, there are methodologies to utilize for that. But in terms of zoning compliance determination, it's has the property and all of the agreements as conditioned, have they been met to allow for the planning department to determine zoning compliance has been fulfilled. With parking, one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that we had an option that was presented by the applicant that allowed for the option of continuing the parking agreement and put that burden on them to do their part to make sure that they continue that. But one thing that is not within their control is if the city opts not to continue that. And so while their zoning compliance is contingent on their willingness to continue that agreement, it is not a situation as currently proposed from my understanding, where if the city wanted to do something, we couldn't get out of it. But we at the same time are not holding their zoning hostage to say, if we want to get out of it, then now you've got to go figure out another solution. We are saying, you're doing your due diligence by providing a parking solution. If the city then opts to get out of this but develop more public parking, that's one option. The applicant could then utilize that public parking to fulfill their agreement. The other option could be if they came back to you and said, hey, we have the lease agreement for these public parking spaces, but we figured out an alternative. We would like to get out of it, but before we would support that request to get out of it, they would need to provide an alternative for your consideration. So it is intended to allow for the city to have the control of whether or not we want to continue that lease, but it doesn't then revisit zoning compliance if it's outside of the applicant's control to continue that agreement.
So with the surface lot that we're currently considering right next door, was it ever considered to bring in these additional 22 some odd spaces to make that a larger lot?
I mean, we could. We didn't plan on it like that.
Was that because of this prearranged agreement that you knew that was kind of already allocated?
Yeah, we anticipated this agreement, so therefore when we designed it, we were anticipating not to add the two together, just because we maybe considered that this parking lot that we're talking about right now would not be public. So
I'm just thinking, if you're saying that if they could use shared parking on a public lot to satisfy the requirements of the certificate, would it not make sense to have a larger lot there and give them use of some of those spaces, or all of those spaces, rather than having a city-owned lot, a private lot, and one sandwiched in the middle that we own but lease out? I don't know, it just seems a little convoluted to me.
My only concern is, I mean, if you want to put it up and allow them to use it, let them use that one, not the one that we're building. That one, I think we discussed gating it off at night and saying you can't overpark. My concern is we shouldn't be putting Chronicle Mill parking signs, and I'm assuming that's what they're going to do on these 22 spots. If there's a way around that, then I'm okay with it. But I think this should be open to the public.
Yeah.
I mean, we have go through cries of the parking issues, and again, I'm sorry, but the sins of the forefathers types of thing. I didn't approve Chronicle, but we are here. We are today. So I mean, I think keep the 22 spots in the city's pocket where we can use it. They can use it, and then the private lot or the other lot we're building just stays separate, as we discussed last time.
I hear what you're saying. I think one of the things that I would ask that Parks helps us determine is, again, that access. The access to the city spaces right now is solely through the private lot that's owned by the developer. There is no current public access to the parking that's on the city's portion of the lot.
Yeah, but if we're considering it a shared lot, wouldn't it be implied that we can use their entranceway into this shared lot? I mean, again, I'm not an attorney, but you guys have thrown out language as this is a shared type of lot agreement. I mean,
that's why I just think portioning it off and making it one big city lot with shared spaces is perhaps a better.
And I think that, I just want to clarify, so we have looked at this a variety of different ways, and so we had at one point looked at this as a shared use agreement, and that's still an option, but the current proposal is not a shared use agreement. The current proposal is a parking lease agreement that would allow for that use to be paid for in exchange for a monetary commitment to the city of Belmont.
So, no, and I just want to clarify, I understand what's before me, I'm just saying, potentially we should look at the alternative.
I agree, and I think the applicant is open to whatever would allow them to successfully meet their zoning compliance determination utilizing that lot, however the city would like it structured, but the direction received was to present it as a lease agreement for your consideration, and that's what we have before you tonight on the agenda item.
So let me ask you, is the city signing this agreement, let's just say we go ahead and sign it, that satisfies what you verbally told them, and it allows them to get their certificate. Okay, that's accomplished.
It will. There's a couple things, again, that they are still working on that I would wait on signing that zoning compliance for, one of which is the rapid flashing beacon installation. They're working on that. They're ordering it, but we don't have it on the ground yet, and I haven't seen a contract that says it's coming or a commitment, so we would hold signing, but it would allow for, once all of the components are put into place, it would allow for staff to sign the zoning compliance determination for the applicant.
So if signing this satisfies both parties' desires, makes them whole, so to speak,
yes.
Why would we commit to 2028 with 2 5-year riders? Why would we not say this is 1 year annually renewable instead of making a commitment to 2038. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, if the goal,
Planning staff doesn't have any recommendation as to that. That is between the city and the applicant to determine the terms that you all feel comfortable with.
I don't recall where the renewal came from. Was that in one of their edits?
I think it was. I think that we
could
initially
go back to
thought that 1 year period from the city standpoint would suffice. They came back to say, can we get a longer extension on that? And so here we are. We're like, yeah, if council wants to approve it, then I don't see a reason why we wouldn't extend it out for a period of time where we have income coming in and increases per year for that period of time.
all right, any more discussion?
I just think we need to give a lot of careful consideration into how, big picture, how this future lot that we're considering right next door, how that's going to potentially integrate with this in terms of access to these, if it's going to be shared use of those 22, are we still going to have to go through their entry and exit to get to those spaces? Is there some way to integrate the two?
I think that we were considering when we were talking about the new gravel lot, tying into a private lot and how that may look. We didn't want all the traffic like flowing through the private property lot.
Right.
Would that even be allowed? Therefore, that's why we separated it. If we wanted to, with this other project that we have coming up, this gravel lot, we can design it however. We might have to consider how we don't go through private property to get there.
And I think, from my recollection, with not having that before me, I believe that the plan for the gravel lot did call for new curb cuts along Chronicle that would not,
that's correct.
that would be brand new ones that wouldn't require people to access through the lot in question as part of the city.
Are we looking for direction here?
So, well, I think this, I mean, it was on the consent agenda. It was going to be voted on, up or down. So, I mean, what you have before you is to vote as presented. I believe you can vote modify the conditions.
Yeah.
Or if you, I think if you maybe want some more time to digest it, is this time sensitive? Is it something that could be deferred till next month?
We are at your disposal if you tell us what you need, and we will communicate that with the applicant.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm asking, they've gone 4 years under
Sure.
a current status. Would 30 days move the needle one way or the other?
They can't finalize any commitments that they have with the bank, from my understanding, until all of the details are buttoned up. But that being said, they need to be buttoned up in a way that the city is comfortable with. And so I'm sure that timeliness is important to them, but I haven't heard of a hard and fast deadline that they need to meet.
I mean, at a minimum, I would like to see that restriction that you know, for those spaces, that there's not overnight, or it can't be restricted to Chronicle use only.
Well, that would
and
be,
also that I would be more in favor of a shorter term, even annually renewable, versus locking into
yeah, I'm
15
not in
years.
favor of the length of time that they're requesting.
the paragraph 3 is the provision. If you look a couple sentences down, it says, lessee shall have the right but not the obligation to undertake any measures or promulgate and enforce any rules and regulations which lessee deems reasonably necessary or appropriate to enforce the parking rights on the premises, which may include, by way of illustration but not limitation, imposing parking fines against or towing the automobiles of violating parties from the premises, controlling access to and from the premises, erecting signage on the premises, installing parking space markers or placards on the premises, and posting rules governing the use of the premises.
So they are looking to have sort of carte blanche.
Well, they have, yeah, I mean, they have the right,
to
but
do
not,
that. I mean,
not the obligation.
What if
But they have
we
the right.
remove that section out of the agreement, right? Because then wouldn't that infer that we still have the right as citizens to utilize that lot?
Well, if we're, you know, I probably would then go along with tabling this to later, because I think we need to understand the ramifications of removing some of these things and how they'd affect other provisions.
And it may restructure the agreement, but I am no attorney and would defer to Parks on whether or not it's now referred to as a lease agreement or whether it's a shared parking agreement, depending on your preferred structure.
All right, so with
I
all
think we
this
should table
said,
Under their shared parking, was there any revenue?
Yes, and this agreement there is.
No, under the shared parking agreement.
I don't know that the discussions got that far, but I
Okay.
have seen other shared parking agreements that do have a revenue component.
That would be interesting
That would
to
be
consider.
preferable.
Yeah. Just as an option.
Sure.
Well, then, as opposed to motioning to kick it down the can again, I mean, would it be prudent to, if the majority agrees, to make the motion to make it shareable with the caveat that there is some type of source of income to it?
I think if you're gonna make it's a different document.
Yeah. Okay. So this would almost need to be voted down and then a new one being proposed.
Unless you wanna modify this,
Are there ramifications for voting this down, though?
Can you not bring both of them back for further consideration and choose one or the other?
Yeah.
You can make a recommendation to remove the sentence or the section about the
Right.
signage, and then we'll take that back to the Chronicle Mill folks. If they agree to it, then we bring you back into agreement at that time, and you would have to consider
And
it.
maybe, I don't like just striking, I'd
Yeah.
like to have something in there that says they're not allowed to do to erect signage.
Right.
And see how they react to that.
How do we feel about the term?
Well, I mean, how do you feel also about the option to have controlled access? I mean, it's a public lot, you can't really have controlled access. Because I'm assuming that would be code or key or something
Well-
the general public would not have access to.
Can we motion to defer and then potentially with the direction to staff, if we collectively agree, to get an option A and an option B? And option A is as presented, option B is this kind of
Modified lease agreement?
modified version we're discussing of the shared pay potential opportunity. Would that be okay, Park?
Modified lease agreement or modified
shared
parking?
Shared parking.
Okay.
So shared and per Tiffany, it sounds like we have agreements where we have a shared agreement plus receiving revenue, so I think that would probably be.
It's gonna kind of mirror a lease, I guess.
I don't know that there's any examples to clarify that the city has of that structure, but I have seen them between applicants and other entities within the city.
Let me say, just for my own knowledge and for access, is there the opportunity, can't remember how this is situated, but would there be the opportunity to put a curb cut in to grant another access point?
Do you mean if we wanted to ever connect any future city?
No, I mean just
parking
off
to
the
that lot?
street to these 22 spots. Could you put a
I
curb?
do not believe the space is sufficient, but I haven't analyzed that to be fully sure. The way that they are oriented right now, they are part of parking rows that extend between the city's parcel and the adjacent parcel that's owned by the developer.
It's like the back. So if you're on Catawba Street, it's the back of the parking lot, I believe is what's in.
And there was, I believe, there's an exhibit as well in your packet that shows those spaces highlighted in green. There's a map there to let you be able to see the layout as it's currently striped with the enhancements provided by the developer.
So I think the options would be, I don't think we could do as presented with the shared parking agreement. It's as presented with the lease, and then you're saying like a shared parking agreement with some of these things removed. Is that would be like option A is as presented with the lease. Option B, shared parking agreement.
Oh, I just meant as presented as it is tonight. I just want the other option for me personally to vote on for a shared agreement with the lease potential on there maybe. Right?
Yeah, I
don't know. It's everybody.
I don't know that there's anybody here that would want to accept it the way it is.
Yeah.
presented
Then that's
right
fine. Then
now.
we'll just strike that.
Do you want to eliminate the renewal terms altogether and just have a straight 5-year lease?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That struck me. Why would we commit this property till 2038?
That's why I was, Can you give us some direction on that?
What recourse would they have if we struck that? I mean, under the
We would
scenario
just-
you and Jim mentioned earlier, where, forget the term you used for it, but.
Vested rights.
Yeah. If we were to strike some of these more substantive
Well,
clauses, is
I
that?
don't think that as long as we gave them a term of, a reasonable term for a lease, I think that takes away and it doesn't disqualify, they can get their zoning certificate, then I think that sort of
That's what
takes
they're
away
after.
I mean, you could even have options to renew. The way it's drafted right now is it automatically renews unless they decide not to at their discretion. We could have a renewal provision somewhat different than that, that would give us more leeway into whether it's renewed or not. Is that mutually agreeable?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So where are we headed with this? Because I'm unclear. Are we going to table this and take this back up?
Yeah, I think motion to defer this. It's not going to pass tonight the way everyone's discussing this, and potentially add in the shared option, and I think investigate the lease portion of it as well, right? Because I feel like as long as they have access to it, they can get what they need. But
I guess you're getting the pulse here, Miles, that, you know, the things we want to see,
Yeah.
would like to see are not a long-term commitment.
Right.
No ability to restrict parking with signage.
Got those.
There was another point that you raised about entry and exit points.
That doesn't sound like that's feasible.
Okay. I mean, I guess those are the two main things that we're all kind of concerned about.
Yeah.
So rather than vote, can you want to just give staff directive to go back and bring back another revised document? Rather than.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
All right, then that's a direction. All right. With that resolved or deferred, I would go into reports.
For the reports, I guess as we go around for the other business items, I appreciate council members reaching out and providing me with some feedback on certain items that may be discussed, and you'll see that I've asked certain staff members to come up at times if they have to provide an update. So just let everybody know that if you see folks walking up to the microphone, then that's probably what that is.
Okay. All right, then why don't we begin other business with Jason tonight?
All right. So first off, I'd like to really commend our city manager, public works staff, police, fire, and other city staff for all of your hard work in the aftermath of the severe storms and flooding that we've had this last month. I thought that was great work considering all that we all had to deal with, and you guys kept it flowing for us. So we appreciate it. The second item I had was I had a couple of business owners that have recently pointed out to me that while they were trying to abide by, I guess there's a rule stipulating that you're not allowed to have temporary signage, you know, in front of your buildings, especially on the street fronts, but there were certain businesses around town who are doing this, and I guess they were just looking to try to have some consistent enforcement of that. This may require some staff response, this next item, which is, do we know what the conditions of approval were for Elevation Church, specifically regarding their planned usage of the facility and the number of expected guests when we approve that zoning application, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so for both the temporary signage and the conditions of approval for Elevation Church, Tiffany's going to provide an update on both of those items.
Thank you.
All right, first I will go ahead and start with Elevation Church because it happens to be the email that I have record of right now. The parking requirements for Elevation Church were looked at when we received in our department a request for an upfit permit. So this project did not go through conditional zoning and didn't have what we would normally deem as conditions of approval associated with that. Our land development code looks at parking requirements based off of specific uses. And so for the use of assembly, which is what is designated for a church type of use, assembly requires 1 parking space per 4 seats, which is typically applied as the seats within the largest assembly area within a designated use. With that calculation, the area as we received on the plans for the largest room in the church was 443 seats. And so looking at the parking calculations for that, the requirements would be 111 parking spaces Our ordinance also allows for parking requirements to be satisfied using on-street parking in front of buildings or public lots within 300 feet of the primary building entrances. And so staff did look at this as it related to ensuring compliance when we issued the upfit permit, but downtown there are significant numbers of public parking lots, and there is not a limitation onto the percentage that can be counted right now. So when we did that, originally we had excluded the Mill Street lot because we know there's a known development application on that parcel. Without that, there would be 96 spaces in the vicinity of 300 feet. However, upon further review and conversation, we needed to count the lots that were on the Mill Street property because they were, while they were filed, they were not yet an approved development, and they did have an active lease for the city to utilize that area for public parking, and our ordinance doesn't clarify or quantify any of those agreements. And so because those are counted as public parking today, they were then included in the count, which brought the public parking spaces within the 300-foot radius to 132 public parking spaces, which was exceeding the requirements of 111 per staff's calculations. And so with that, it met it. So staff issued a zoning permit because the project as proposed for the upfit was in compliance with the land development code in place at the time of submittal. That being said, understanding that parking was likely going to be a concern, the planning department did add to the zoning permit a recommendation that's not enforceable, but that was a recommendation that encouraged the applicant to meet with the downtown director as well as the adjacent businesses surrounding the property in order to come up with a proactive parking plan ahead of opening and to ensure that the impact on neighboring businesses was minimized as much as possible. Again, it was a recommendation that was made by staff, but based off of how we received the application was for an upfit permit. It did not get considered by planning board or city council because it was not a request for conditional zoning or anything similar. The zoning was established and the property at its former use, although it remained vacant for a while, was formerly used as Exodus Church. So it was transitioning from a church use to a church use. So there was no change in use associated with its reoccupancy.
So a few questions. What sort of feedback did you get, if any, from any of those business owners or the director of the DBDA about whether the tenant met with them prior to?
I did not receive any feedback, but I did not ask. It was a recommendation made to the applicant and put that burden on the applicant to do their due diligence in doing so.
For information purposes, I know that the business owner directly adjacent to Elevation Church got no dialogue or meeting whatsoever prior to. And my understanding was that their communicated use of this facility was going to be quote unquote office and an occasional, whether it's a worship service or a large gathering. Now, occasional can be subjective depending on who you're talking to, right? As I understand it now, they have between 700 and 800 people between two services on each Sunday. So I guess my question is,
how many? Can you say that again?
700 to 800 on a given Sunday between two services. So I guess my question is, and I'm not putting this on you.
Sure.
What thought or consideration may have been given to those adjacent businesses, say south of the railroad tracks, and the impacts that this would have on them?
Sure. So when it comes to upfit permits, the review by our department is solely, does it comply with the land development code? And if so, we are obligated to issue the zoning permit. It doesn't mean that those factors aren't made aware by staff, but we encourage people to be good neighbors and have conversations where we can't require them to do so through the land development code. That being said, we are always hopeful that those conversations will occur, and we understand that if the land development code doesn't meet the expectation of the city, we have opportunities to amend it as necessary for future.
So there's no recourse if one establishment happens to take up all 132 spaces within 300 feet of this location. There's no recourse for any of those business owners or for the city to, there's no recourse for any of this, right?
So not from my reading of the land development code. However, I would defer to Lindsay Yeager in terms of enforcement. The one thing I would say is that any building occupant has to comply with fire code. And so fire code is different than the parking regulations, and they would need to ensure that the occupancy does not exceed what is posted by the city's fire department for allowable numbers of occupants within any given space and the building as a whole. And so if there is any implication or evidence that they are exceeding that, I would say that that would need to go through the fire department and Lindsay Yeager for that portion of it.
Just out of curiosity, we know what their capacity is there?
Any other questions for Tiffany?
Now, they get to count those spaces, right? But I think we've heard that they're excluding others from those spaces or directing them away. Now, certainly, they're not allowed to do that under the Land Development Code or any ordinance.
They were. They're not doing that any longer.
So I do want to add to this. Me and Maddie went to lunch this past Sunday, and they did in fact have cones and folks, volunteers, blocking certain areas and asking whether you were here for the church and or business.
Even this past Sunday?
Yes, I can confirm that I did that.
Where were the cones?
Right behind Sammy's.
They grab a lot.
And I'll say our land development code doesn't talk about human behavior, but I do believe the police department have authority to regulate what happens in public parking spaces and along public streets.
Tiffany, let me ask you a question, because I don't know that we have a flaw in our code, but it would seem like it, in that we have known for some time that these parking spaces were transitory in nature, that there was going to be a development on there. So maybe we need to amend our code to recognize that fact, because you're counting this as parking
long term,
right, when in fact we know that these spots are going to disappear and magnify the parking problem that we're already experiencing downtown. So maybe we need to look at a text amendment to not allow those calculations on leased lots that may have a future development plan. I mean, I understand you're constrained by the language we have now, but I mean, for me, this was a foreseeable issue.
Yeah.
And it could be applied to an apartment complex as well, right? If we're using this as a shared spots throughout the entire community, because what do they always say? Walkability, more parking, things like that. Utilizing existing parking spots. So it's not just a church, it could be an apartment or some other use as well.
With an apartment, based off of the current regulations in place, as a reminder, anything with 50 units or above would come to you for conditional zoning. So this would be a much larger and broader conversation. With an upfit permit or just a typical zoning permit, that's where we're seeing, something that we allow churches in every single zoning designation within the city's limits. And you're right that we do have a complexity in our parking in that we have some that's on city-owned lots and we have some that are on leased lots in order to meet the needs of the city. So it is something that staff's open to looking at per council's direction, however you would like us to do so moving forward.
Well, I mean, I don't know about the rest of you. I think it would make sense to take a look at that caveat within the code, because you have long-term ramifications on a lot that's transitory in nature.
Understood?
They would be grandfathered there, right?
They would. I would think they would.
But if they were to move, it would, right?
Well, if they were to move, it would alleviate that particular
I know, but
problem.
if another church were to come in.
Chief?
All right, so Chief is up.
The current occupancy load is 860.
Really?
Chief Falls.
Just to give a little clarification on what she alluded to as far as enforcement action as it applies to public parking. I only have authority that you give me as far as that goes, as far as enforcement action. Taking into consideration that on Mill Street, if I'm not mistaken, there's a 2-hour parking limit, but these church services are not lasting longer than 2 hours, and that's something we can address and look into. But the rest of the parking spaces downtown for public parking are all the rules and regulations that are assigned to them currently are only Monday through Friday at certain times, and on Saturday there is no regulations that talk about it in the code about Sundays. Sundays is like a free day. So I just want to make sure you understand I can do the enforcement action if necessary. And I believe, just for one more clarification point on this, kind of been following along with everything, the lot that they went in and did all the improvements to right in behind their building and leveled it out and put gravel in, and then you have the lot over to the left where the old buildings used to be. I believe the reason, I don't know specifically, but my thought process in this is the reason they have it coned off, and they're asking people where to park at if you're going to like Sammy's or downtown for eating or for the purposes of parking at the church, because they did utilize that. They did do improvements to the gravel lot to the right if you go down the little drive there. So I'm thinking logically that they're asking those people so that they can go to the right or they can go to the left and park in the existing what was before public parking. So I think that's some of the things that I've been listening to add a little clarification to that helps. If y'all have any more questions, let me know.
I know that John Bailey said that Matt Madanata at Old Stone, since they're not open on Sundays, he did give Sammy's employees permission to use his space behind Old Stone to park on Sundays. So that, at least for his employees, that provides some relief for them. But for his guests, I mean, they're kind of out of luck during those hours. But
all right.
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and allow.
Sorry, I just had two more quick points. Are we up to completion on the pothole repairs? Most of the bigger ones that we got notice of, like I know Julia Avenue is basically our big one that we're responsible for.
Hey, Jonathan Wilson, can provide an update on the pothole repairs. Our new Public Works Director, Jonathan Wilson. He's got updates for potholes and I think Julia Avenue paving, potentially.
Yes, so last week NCDOT repaired potholes on Central Avenue, South Point Road, Lower Armstrong Road. They did patch those. Hopefully they will come back once the weather warms up and do a full repair on that. City crews repaired two potholes on Brook Street, one in the Cherub's parking lot, and then also on Central Avenue at Clements Auto, which was originally a utility repair that was failing, so we went back and repaired that as well. Additionally, with Julia Avenue, we've been meeting with contractors. Actually met with one this afternoon and spoke to some on Friday about getting some pricing to do a mill and overlay on Julia Avenue in two different sections. One section being from South Point Road to Greenwood Avenue, and then the second section being David Street to Main Street.
You said the repairs that were made on Julia, the DOT did those?
No, we haven't made repairs on Julia yet. We're getting pricing on that.
Not the improvements, but just like the potholes.
We haven't repaired anything on
None of
Julia.
that's been, okay. Thank you.
What time frame would you be looking at for the Julia?
For Julia,
Yeah.
one contractor that we met with this afternoon, of course this is all dependent on budget and pricing that they submit, so that they could potentially get it complete by 1st of March. And that would be a mill of 2 inches, 2-inch overlay on Julia. And then also where the existing potholes are, they would do a full depth patch, which would be 4 inches of milling, bring that back up, and then 2 inches on top.
Would it make sense to coincide it with some type of holiday that the South Point would be on, like maybe spring break? If we were to go that route, that is, so that we would minimize the amount of traffic that would be going down there.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And just to clarify, Julia Avenue is not in the budget that we have.
Right.
So we would have to develop this project outside of kind of the budget, get several quotes on it, bring it back to council for consideration, and then move forward with the project.
We do have some funding in the streets budget, but it's going to depend on what that comes back at.
Okay.
All right, Catherine.
Thank you. Can I make one more statement? Sorry. And this is just, I just wanted to kind of put this out there given the events of last week. Though it's been stated through various channels over the last week, I would like to reiterate that our mayor, our city council, and our city staff, especially our police department, are fully committed to maintaining a safe environment that Belmont has always enjoyed. However, we would implore our citizens to understand that when unprecedented criminal events happen like last week, there's only so much information that we can disclose as investigations are still ongoing. But rest assured, our staff and their collaborating federal, state, and local agencies are all working around the clock to prosecute these cases, while simultaneously doing our dead level best to ensure that these types of events do not occur in Belmont.
Thank you.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine.
All good. I'm just kidding. So I'm going to piggyback off of Jason. I just want to thank you, Chief Falls. I want to thank all your staff for everything that you've done in the past couple weeks. Not only that, but indefinitely. I did want to let you know that we had some residents reach out to us regarding communication on our end. I feel you do a fantastic job communicating to the public on the events that happen. I sincerely appreciate how you do that. But for the residents themselves, I spoke to one verbally on the phone. She basically said, you know, I have a neighbor that's 90 years old. I have a neighbor that's 55 years old, and they aren't on social media. They don't have email, but they have a phone and they have text messaging. What can we do to communicate to our citizens in town on certain events that may come about, so that we're in the know and we're not being fed false information through different outlets? And I said, you know, it's kind of like the Amber Alert. It's kind of like, you know, when you hear the fire alarm going off, not on a Sunday at 2 o'clock, because we know it goes off Sunday at 2 o'clock as a test. But if you hear it any other time, you better get in your basement or hide in a closet because we've got a tornado. I know these things. So my thought was, what if we could, and it would be governed by police, and it would be an opt-in text through every citizen in our town. They can choose to opt in, so you don't have to have this. This won't cost anything to the resident or the citizen of this town. And essentially, I would opt, but it's true. But if they get a text message, they may say, oh, let me go show up and put my, but it's true. But if they get a text message, they may say, oh, let me go show up and put my 2 cents in. And it would just be something that would give them, it would give them an alert of what's going on in our town. So if we had, God forbid, an incident in Belmead, and you send a text out to all residents and it says Belmead neighborhood in Belmont. We know it's in Belmont. Belmead neighborhood. Lock your doors until further notice. Whatever it may be. I don't know what you can allude to with investigating and stuff like that, but something to just communicate to the citizens in an emergent situation, because that's where she said she felt she didn't know what was going on in the moment. It was hectic, and I know you can't help when the situation has already happened and this is after the fact, but at least you can filter information that you're allowed to after the fact immediately without it going on Facebook and everybody feeding off of that, and then false information is getting transpired, and then we're getting 80 emails, 80 calls, and why we're not communicating when really we can't communicate anything. So maybe it would just be a better option to have for citizens to choose or not choose to be a part of.
Yep. So we have been working on this. We've got like 2 resources right now. We've got our Water Smart system does this kind of text messaging. We also have something called Text My Gov, and it's in the public information officer's hand at this moment. So we've been talking about this and lining this up for implementation. So it just seems to be a perfect opportunity to kind of roll it out. So I asked Jamie, she could provide more information as well, potentially, to give an update on where we stand with this project. So we've been working on this for, I don't know, probably 6 months, at least as long as I've been here.
So we have a service called Text My Gov, and it connects to our work order system, and we have utilized it from a standpoint of it's a phone number for people that they can communicate with us. So it's on some signs in the parks, and so what happens with that right now is it's a phone number, and people can text and say, oh, there's this playground equipment needs to be updated, or there's a problem, and they could take a picture and it texts and it creates a work order. So then our public works staff can go out and address it. It works the other way too, that we're not utilizing because we had the Water Smart system. But there's just kind of this question of the Water Smart system is very much needs to be a communication system for our water customers. And then there's the side of the resident. You know, they are 2 in the same, but we need to differentiate them with certain communications. And we don't want to eliminate them from saying if they opt out of we're sending them all this information over here through WaterSmart. We don't want them to opt out of that because we don't want them to not get the information from their water account. Does that make sense? So now we have the other one that we can now utilize from the other way. So we're looking at doing that. And so what it would be, but it is an opt-in. And that is I want to make sure that everybody knows that is a very difficult thing because they have to opt in. We can't take phone numbers that we currently have from one system and dump them into another and say, okay, here. They have to do it on their side. So it's a learning curve with people that are older, making sure they know how they're doing it. So it will have to be a big push. And we did that from the WaterSmart standpoint, but it was a little different because people are used to doing it with your utilities. So it's something that we can do. It's just going to take a little bit of time for us to build that up in order to be able to efficiently get that information out.
So was the water program, was that an opt-in as well?
It was an opt-in. And when we communicated with people, we were not communicating with them that it was for this massive amount of stuff. It's okay,
sure,
go in, opt in for your water stuff, and then every once in a while we can send you out information, but we are very specific about what we send out in that because we don't want a mass amount of people opting out. So it's a little bit more complicated, I think, than some people realize because of some of the laws that are actually associated with communication and text messages and no call lists and things like that. So, but it's definitely something that we can do, and we have the resource now. We just have to see what we have to do to add the other part where we can go back on the other side. But we'll need your help in getting it out to making sure that people that you're talking to know that they can sign up for the system, and and some of these older residents too, making sure that they're aware of what they can do.
I think if it was adequately publicized, inserts in the water bill, social media, website, that people would.
So great idea. Yes, we're working on it. We just got to get it implemented. Chief, do you have anything to add to that? I know I kind of cut you off.
Yeah, and it would be able to be used by police department. It'd be able to use citywide.
Just one more thing to add. I just want to kind of reiterate, not specifically to text messaging from us to an individual, but from an individual to us. Please go on our website, the City of Belmont's website, under the police link, and there's a thing on there. It's a system called Frontline, and we do look at those. We have several hundred of those since we implemented it for one of the CALIA things that we do. A requirement for that is if you have a concern or a complaint that you'd like to file, or something like, there's a pothole in the road or whatever, please utilize that system, because we deal with people daily on it, and we try to stay on top of it and get a response pretty quick. And we have had some stuff that's come in since some of the things that's happened recently, and we were able to speak to those individuals and kind of assure them that everything's okay. And so please go on that website and utilize that if you want to. If you have a complaint or a concern, reach out to the police department, reach out to the website, reach out to me, and we'll handle it accordingly. We handle every complaint, minute or big. So that's all I'd like to reiterate. Thanks.
Awesome. We could point people to that on our own pages, to that link.
Catherine, do you have anything else?
No, that was it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and defer to speak last. So, Jim.
Well, I'd like to thank our retiring city engineer, Jerry Hatton, who recently retired, for his all his years of service to the city of Belmont, and wish him well. I want to sort of adjacent, literally, to what we were talking about with Sammy's and Elevation Church. I think there was some discussion about additional spaces being offered to the city in connection with that, and it was brought up a couple meetings ago, and I think that was news. It had been talked about, I think, by the upfitter, if you will, with planning staff, but not the planning director, and there was going to be more information looked into. So, Miles, I think you have some information on that.
Yes, I spoke with Preston Wilson, I think it was early last week, and he was talking about, he's the one that did the upfit for Elevation Church and also improved the parking lot for the gravel lot. And he said that he thought that there was another area at the gravel lot that he could probably add another, I think he said maybe 15 or so spaces. And it's just, I have to go meet him there, possibly with Jonathan, kind of show us where those are, put it on a map. But given that we lease that property from Belmont Land, we have to show that to Belmont Land to make sure that they're comfortable with it as well. So Preston said that he was willing to, you know, provide the extra parking spots if we're good for it, and if Belmont Land wants to move forward. Yep.
So that's obviously, we like it when people want to offer
Yeah.
more parking spaces. So just, I'm glad to hear that's being followed up on.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question to that?
You may.
Have we, I know Preston, because he approached me as well to this, to say that they would be willing to do this.
Mhm.
Considering some of the previous discussions with Belmont Land in regards to a potential proposed development there, would it be prudent to get all three parties, the city, Belmont Land, and Elevation, into the same room and talk about a potential partnership in expanding the parking out there, i.e. parking deck?
Sounds like a great opportunity.
I think that would probably be a good one. So, sorry.
That's
Just wanted
fine.
to add that in there.
Do you have anything further?
Yes. I know this dates back to December of '22, but we originally had a capital improvement item for renovations of City Hall. And then we had that presentation about the vision, and we, I think at the retreat then said, well, let's hold off on the renovations until we figure out what exactly is going on, because we don't want to renovate it and then we reimagine downtown or whatever. However, I have had some people communicate to me that notwithstanding that the outside of City Hall perhaps is showing some wear and tear in certain places, and I know we're holding off on the bigger renovations while we figure out what all is going down with that. But perhaps since the exterior of the building is still City Hall and it still says City Hall on it, I think that there's an expectation that it might look, presentable, and so perhaps there's some cosmetic changes that could be made there to improve the exterior appearance as a stopgap while we figure out what we're going to do long term with the building as a whole.
Yes, sir. I'll take a look at it. I don't know what is the need out there, but we'll look into it.
You can talk, I think some folks from Keep Belmont Beautiful or Flower Power would have some thoughts on what specifically is amiss. Okay. And then lastly, because you promised an update on the North Belmont Booster Pump Station.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So we spoke with the design engineer today, who also spoke with the contractor today. Unfortunately, this project is still lingering from COVID-19 delays and materials, particularly with the packaged pump station. Right now, the delivery of that pump station is scheduled for March 8th. Substantial completion of that project would be 1 month later, April 8th, with final completion being another month, May 8th. So hopefully we'll be getting it wrapped up soon. Between the substantial completion and final completion, it will appear as it is complete, but there will still be doing testing and internal checks and inspections before we finally close out that project. So it will appear complete to the public, should be April 8th.
Thank you.
So I've gotten several calls and emails on that as well. So we can tell our neighbors in North Belmont that by early summer, May 8th is a target date for bringing that online?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it.
Charlie?
Yeah, so I got a couple things. First off, thanks to Miles and Jonathan with the pothole situations. We had a lot of rain, a lot of runoff, caused a lot of road imperfections. You guys were very quick to remedy those that have already been remedied, and want to just congratulate you guys on that. That was pretty awesome to see. In keeping with the theme of public safety, in light of what's happened recently, it reminded me of a conversation I had with Chief Falls probably about a month ago or so, where we had a conversation about flock cameras. And if you guys don't know what those are, they're, keep me honest here, Chief, they're cameras that'll read your license plate and determine whether or not it's a stolen vehicle, and it will send an email to all the local police departments and giving them alert on where the vehicle was seen according to whatever flock camera. A lot of neighborhoods are starting to use these. And talking with Chief Falls, he brought up that one city in Gaston County actually has it where any new development has to have a flock camera installed at their entrance and exit of that neighborhood. And I thought that would be something that we could look at, because given the events that have just happened, that would be, in my opinion, something that we should definitely look at. And then to take it a step further, I think Gastonia just recently announced this, where they've set up flock cameras strategically throughout the city. And when I was talking to Chief Falls about the cameras a month or so ago, he brought up putting them at strategic points in Belmont, capturing kind of the choke points. An example would be having one on the right there near the Catawba River Bridge on 74, capturing all the cars there. But I would also like to look at maybe putting one at major intersections in Beaumont. A great one would obviously be the South Point Harris Teeter intersection, or maybe the Bojangles intersection right there. So just some food for thought, especially given the events that have transpired over the last week or so. I think that it's probably time to start doing something like that and being proactive, so that we can kind of get out in front of that and not be in the situation we're in now. And that's all I got.
Alex?
Again, I also want to thank the Public Works and Miles and staff. You know, it's really cool to see everybody come together to get those potholes done. I mean, that was quick. I mean, literally, I saw something, an email about it or something on Facebook, and then that same week, I think it was filled. So
it was the next morning.
Next morning.
I went out and I looked. It was the next morning. I was like, good grief.
Amazing work, and you guys don't get enough credit for that. Number two, I agree with what Jason in his statement. I appreciate you, Jason, saying that statement. I would just ask, you know, to the public and to everyone in this room, just to give the police department patience here while they try to work this out. They're doing their best. The officers are working night and day to get this done, over hours to try to figure this out. This is not a normal thing in Belmont, and I have full confidence in our leadership in the police department that they're going to get this figured out, particularly with the agencies they're working with. So I really would just ask to the public that you give the police department their space and patience, because they are working this case and they will get this solved. I have 100% full confidence we will bring these people to justice. So I do appreciate Mayor Turner talking to the district attorney and also emphasizing those words to him as well. Just two things really, and Miles, I apologize for the short notice on this, but one is just, you know, it's popped up in the past, but I've gotten some complaints again in regards to the Davis lights kind of at the ballpark and the tennis courts being left on late into the hours of the night. Just curious if there's anything we can do about that, because again, those lights are very bright. They go right into the into those houses. And then number two, which I think we do have an update on, is we have discussed this in the past and trying to get an update in regards to allowing vendors, particularly let's call them like food vendors, into parks during whether it's soccer games, baseball games, whatever have you, and allowing them to be, you know, permit or set up or something like that. Is there an update on that by chance?
I don't have an update, but that's one of the items that the mayor's asked to be placed on the March regular meeting, so we'll bring that back to your attention in March.
Perfect. Yes, sir. With that being said, that's all I have.
Alex, I have a question. Okay, the lights at Davis, are you talking about both sets of lights, the tennis and the baseball field?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. My wife's grandparents live right across the street over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're actually the ones that, but I talked to their
Mentioned it.
neighbors and it's also an issue for them as well. And
So, Parks and Rec have the key to cut on and cut off those lights. They're not automatic, like it's not something that we can time.
Mhm.
So whoever's in charge of using that field or is using that field at the moment, and it's in an evening time, whoever is on staff for Parks and Rec should be cutting those lights off after they're finished, if I'm not mistaken.
We'll make sure that happens.
Is that the same for the tennis courts?
Now, the tennis courts,
they're
I can't
timers.
let
The
you
tennis
know.
courts are timers.
Yeah, but I definitely know, because Davis Park,
I mean, we don't need to hash this out tonight. I'm just
no,
saying.
no, just, somebody needs to cut them off.
Yes, sir.
That's it. That's all I have.
All right, one of the items I had has already been addressed, and that's good news for our friends up north, North Belmont, the booster pump. They have issues with water pressure up there, so that's good news for them. I would also like to acknowledge and thank Jerry Hatton, city engineer, for his years of service to the city of Belmont. Something that was mentioned to me were our crosswalks downtown. At one point, they were stained. That stain is coming off fairly rapidly. I know we had a discussion at one time about possibly high-vis crosswalks downtown. So I guess we would need to decide which direction we're going to go. Are we going to restain them and keep that look, or are we going to move to something a little bit more high visibility and decide, I guess, at a later date? But they are looking worn. I would like, again, to thank the police and fire and staff for everything you do. It's been a tough week, a tough month for different reasons, rain and some certain events. To piggyback off what Jason said, you know, public safety is our #1 priority. We are going to have a safe community. What happened was a statistical anomaly for Belmont. I've lived here for 30-some years. It's the first time any event like this has happened. Just want everyone to know that we, City Council, myself, police, staff, all take these events very seriously. And we are going to pursue the conclusion of this. To that end, I have been speaking with District Attorney. District Attorney has promised to pursue this vigorously and prosecute this vigorously. Now, with all of that said, I would like the public to also understand that this is an ongoing case, and staff, the chief, us, we have certain constraints about what we can say publicly. But I just want you all to know that we are working on this. Everyone is working on it. The chief has spent multiple nights, I know, at the PD. I don't believe he's gone home. He's taking this personally, and we are going to resolve it and bring it to resolution. But I do want everyone to understand our commitment. I mean, priority 1 is public safety, and we will see that the public is safe. So with that, that is the conclusion of public other business. At this time, if you're so moved, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.